The ring on the table. Hook. 100 words. When Duchess Elara Whitcomb placed her wedding ring on the silver platter in front of her husband's mistress, the entire ballroom fell silent. 7 years of being invisible, 7 years of holding together an empire while being treated like furniture, ended in that single devastating gesture. No screaming, no tears, just one woman deciding she was done disappearing. What happened next tore apart the most powerful house in the realm and proved that the quietest person in the room had always been the most dangerous. If you want to see how a forgotten wife became unforgettable, stay until the end. Hit that like button and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. The first crack in Elara Whitcomb's marriage didn't come with shouting or broken dishes. It came on a Tuesday afternoon when her husband walked past her in the hallway without looking up from his correspondence. She had been standing there with their 3-year-old daughter on her hip, trying to show him the child's first drawing. A lopsided house with what might have been a horse, or possibly a very unfortunate dog. Darian Whitcomb, Duke of Ashmont, strode past them both as if they were part of the wallpaper. "Darian?" she had said. He kept walking. "Darian?" She tried again, louder this time. His valet, trailing behind him, at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. Darian disappeared into his study. The door clicked shut with a finality that Elara would come to know intimately over the next 4 years. Their daughter, Rosalind, had looked up at her with those wide gray eyes, her father's eyes, and asked, "Is Papa angry?" "No." "Sweetheart," Elara had answered, adjusting the child on her hip. "He's just busy." It was the first of 1,000 small lies she would tell to protect her daughter from the truth, that they had become irrelevant. The thing about becoming invisible is that it doesn't happen all at once. It's erosion, not explosion. It's the dinner conversations that gradually stop including you. It's the way your husband begins discussing estate matters with his steward, but not with you, even though you're the one who's been managing the household accounts for 6 years. It's watching him laugh, actually laugh the way he used to laugh with you, at something his secretary said while you sit 3 feet away and he hasn't met your eyes in a week. Elara had married Darian Whitcomb when she was 19, the daughter of a respectable but financially struggling baronet. It wasn't a love match, not at first. Those were rare in their circles, but there had been respect, warmth even. He had seemed different from the other young lords, more thoughtful, less careless. On their wedding night, he had taken her hand and said, "I know this isn't what you would have chosen, but I hope we can make something good of it." And they had, for a while. She had thrown herself into being the Duchess of Ashmont with the same fierce determination she brought to everything. She learned the names of every servant, every tenant farmer, every business associate. She organized the household with precision, managed the social calendar, negotiated with difficult suppliers, and somehow made the sprawling Ashmont estate run like a well-oiled machine. When Darian's father died unexpectedly, leaving behind a mess of debts and poor investments, it was Elara who had sat up for 3 nights straight going through the books. It was Elara who had identified which properties could be sold, which investments needed to be cut, which alliances needed to be strengthened. She had been 23 years old, 6 months pregnant, and she had saved the Whitcomb fortune. Darian had kissed her forehead and called her brilliant. That was 5 years ago. Now she couldn't remember the last time he touched her at all. The change had been gradual. First, he stopped joining her for breakfast, claiming early meetings. Then he began taking dinner in his study. Their weekly rides through the estate became monthly, then stopped altogether. Conversations became shorter. His smiles, rare and distant. The space between them in bed grew wider, until one night he simply stopped coming to their shared room, claiming his late-night work was disturbing her sleep. She had told herself it was the pressure of his position. The duchy was thriving now. Everyone said so. Darian Whitcomb was considered one of the shrewdest lords in the realm, a man who had taken a failing estate and turned it into a powerhouse. Surely that required focus, sacrifice. She could be patient. She could be understanding. But patience, she would learn, was just another word for slowly suffocating. "Your Grace, the menu for Thursday's dinner." Mrs. Halloway, the head housekeeper, stood in the doorway of Elara's sitting room, tablet in hand. Elara looked up from the correspondence she'd been drafting, a delicate letter to the Marchioness of Varon, whose support they needed for an upcoming vote. "Yes, Mrs. Halloway. Come in." They went through the details. 24 guests. The Vernons, the Castellans, the Ashfords, Lord Pembroke and his new wife, and of course Lady Seraphine Blackwood. Elara's pen paused imperceptibly at that name. Mrs. Halloway noticed. The woman had worked in this house for 30 years. She noticed everything. "Should I, Mrs. Halloway began carefully, "place Lady Blackwood near the Duke as usual?" As usual. As if it were normal for a man's business associate to attend every function, to sit at his right hand, to whisper in his ear while his wife smiled politely from the other end of the table. "Yes," Elara said, her voice level. "The usual arrangements will be fine." After Mrs. Halloway left, Elara sat very still. Through the window she could see the gardens she had redesigned 3 years ago. The rose arbor where she sometimes read to Rosalind. The fountain that had been broken when she arrived and now functioned perfectly because she had personally overseen its repair. She had built this, all of it. The smooth-running household, the strategic alliances, the social connections that kept the Whitcomb name powerful. And no one knew. They thought it was all Darien, brilliant, capable Darien. She was the ghost in the grand house, moving through rooms she had made beautiful, managing systems she had created, maintaining an empire that everyone credited to the man who barely remembered she existed. Thursday's dinner was like all the others. Elara wore a deep blue gown that had been expensive 2 years ago and was slightly out of fashion now. Darien hadn't looked at her long enough to notice, that she'd been wearing the same rotation of dresses for months, carefully letting out seams and updating trim to make them last. The household budget was generous, but she had learned to allocate most of it elsewhere, to the servants' wages, which she had quietly raised, earning their loyalty, to the maintenance that kept the estate pristine, to the gifts and gestures that maintained their social standing. Her own wardrobe was the easiest place to cut. Seraphine Blackwood arrived in crimson silk, diamonds at her throat, laughing at something Darien said before they'd even entered the house. Elara greeted them in the foyer. "Lady Blackwood, how lovely to see you." "Duchess." Seraphine's smile was perfect, sharp. "What a charming home you keep, though I confess I hardly notice the details anymore. I'm here so often." The other woman was beautiful in a way that Elara had never been. Tall, commanding, with dark hair and darker eyes. She moved through the world like she owned it, and perhaps she did. The Blackwood family controlled half the shipping trade in the eastern ports. Darien barely glanced at Elara. "Is everyone here?" "Nearly. The Ashfords sent word they'll be a few minutes late." He was already walking away, Seraphine at his side, discussing some trade agreement. Lord Pembroke's new wife, a sweet girl barely 20, appeared at Elara's elbow. "Your Grace, I've been meaning to ask, those roses in your garden, the white ones, what variety are they? I'd love to plant some at our estate." "Elara smiled. "Alberic Barbier. They're climbers, quite hardy. I can have our gardener prepare some cuttings if you'd like." "Oh, would you? That's so kind." This was her role now. Smile, facilitate, make everyone comfortable. Be useful, but not noticeable. Be perfect, but not present. Dinner was an exercise in endurance. Elara sat at one end of the long table, Darien at the other. Seraphine was, as always, to his right. Elara watched them, the way you watch a play you've seen too many times, knowing every line, every gesture, numb to the performance. Lord Vernon was discussing agricultural reform. Lady Castellan was complaining about the difficulty of finding good staff. The conversation flowed around Elara like water around a stone. "Don't you agree, Your Grace?" Someone had asked her a question. Elara blinked. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" "The new tariffs on northern wool," Lord Ashford said. "Surely they'll affect your estate's exports." She could feel Darien's attention shift finally in her direction, not because he cared about her opinion, but because Lord Ashford had made it relevant. "We've already adjusted our contracts to account for the increase," Elara said calmly. "I negotiated extended terms with our buyers in Varenzia last month. The tariffs won't touch us for at least 2 years, and by then the political situation will have shifted." There was a moment of surprised silence. Several people looked impressed. Darian looked. She couldn't quite read his expression. Annoyed? Surprised that she was capable of independent thought? "Well done," Lord Vernon said. "Forward thinking." Seraphine laughed lightly. "How fortunate the Duke has such a competent wife to handle these details." The words were perfectly polite. The tone suggested that handling details was something akin to arranging flowers. Trivial, decorative work. Elara smiled. "Someone has to." The dinner continued. Elara stopped listening. She found herself studying the candelabra, counting the facets in the crystal, anything to anchor herself to something real. This table, these chairs, this room. She had chosen all of it. After dinner, the men retreated for brandy and cigars. The women gathered in the drawing room for tea and gossip. Elara poured and smiled and said the right things at the right moments. "Your daughter must be, what, 4 now?" Lady Pembroke asked. 7, Elara said. "She turned 7 last month." "Oh, how time flies. You must have had a lovely celebration." "What, dear Sir Parlekikots?" Yea, they had. Elara and Roslyn and the kitchen staff who had baked a cake. Darian had been in the capital on business. He'd sent a gift, an expensive doll that Roslyn had looked at with polite confusion, clearly preferring the set of watercolors Elara had given her. "Yes," Elara said, "quite lovely." Later, much later, after the guests had departed and the house had settled into silence, Elara checked on Roslyn. The girl was asleep, dark hair fanned across her pillow, one hand clutching the edge of her blanket. Elara stood in the doorway, watching her daughter breathe. This, at least, was real. This, at least, mattered. She found Darian in his study, still working. She hesitated in the doorway, wondering if he would even notice she was there. He didn't look up. "Did the evening go well?" "Yes. Lord Vernon expressed interest in the land near the eastern border. I think he's preparing to make an offer." We should consider it." Silence. The scratch of his pen on paper. "Darian." Her voice came out softer than she intended. "Yes?" "When was the last time we had a conversation? A real one?" His pen paused. He looked up, frowning slightly, as if she'd asked him to solve a particularly tedious math problem. "We're having one now." About something other than estate business or social obligations. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with what looked like faint confusion. Something wrong? Was something wrong? 7 years of marriage reduced to hallway passings and impersonal efficiency. A child he barely knew. A wife he'd stopped seeing. "No," she said. "Nothing's wrong." She left before he could respond, climbing the stairs to her empty bedroom. She sat at her writing desk and pulled out her private journal, a leather-bound book that she kept locked in the bottom drawer. March 12th. Another dinner. Another evening of being furniture. Dee spoke to me twice, once to confirm the menu, once to ask if Lord Vernon's carriage had arrived. He laughed 4 times during dinner, all at things S said. I can't remember the last time he laughed at something I said. Can't remember the last time I said anything worth laughing at. R. Asked today why Papa doesn't eat breakfast with us. I told her he's busy. She's 7 years old and already learning that being busy is more important than being present. I should be angrier. I keep waiting to be angry. Instead, I'm just tired. She locked the journal away and prepared for bed. Through the wall, she could hear Darian moving around in his own room, so close, so impossibly far. Sleep didn't come easily. When it did, she dreamed of running through empty hallways, calling out, but no sound came from her throat. No one could hear her. No one ever had. The breaking point, when it finally came, wasn't dramatic. That was the strange part. No screaming match, no discovered affair, though everyone, including Elara, knew about Seraphine by then. It was simply a Tuesday in late spring when Elara sat in her sitting room going through the household accounts and realized she couldn't breathe. Not metaphorically, literally. Her chest was tight, her hands were shaking, and the numbers on the page blurred together. She set down her pen very carefully. She folded her hands in her lap. And she made a decision. That evening, she asked Mrs. Halloway to join her in the study. I need you to help me with something, Elara said, and I need your discretion. Mrs. Halloway had been with the Whitcomb household since before Elara was born. She had steady hands and steadier loyalty. To the house, yes, but more than that, Elara suspected, to the idea that a house should be run properly. Of course, Your Grace. I'm going to start keeping a record, Elara said, of everything I do. Every decision I make, every problem I solve, every alliance I maintain, every single thing that keeps this estate running. I want documentation. Mrs. Halloway's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. Understanding, perhaps, or approval. I can do that, Your Grace. Over the next 3 months, they compiled a record that was devastating in its thoroughness. Elara had always been organized, had always kept notes, but now she was methodical. Every morning meeting with the steward documented, every social call that required careful navigation noted, every financial decision, every staff issue, every crisis quietly averted before it could become visible. All of it, recorded in neat, undeniable detail. She wasn't planning anything specific, not yet. She just needed to see it, needed proof that she wasn't crazy, that she wasn't irrelevant, that the invisible work she did had value. One evening in June, Darian came to her room, an occurrence so rare that she actually startled when he knocked. "May I come in?" "Of course." He entered, looking uncomfortable, uncertain. It was strange to see him uncertain. Darian Whitcomb was always sure of everything. "I wanted to discuss Rosalind's education," he said. "All right. I think it's time we hired a more advanced governess, someone who can prepare her for society. She'll need to make a good match eventually." Rosalind was 7 years old. The idea of already planning her marriage made Elara's stomach turn. "She's a child, Darian. She's our daughter, our only child. Her future is important." Our. As if he had been involved, as if he knew that Rosalind loved drawing but hated mathematics, that she was terrified of thunderstorms, that she'd recently announced she wanted to be a ship captain. "I'll look into it," Elara said. He nodded, turned to leave, paused at the door. "Elara." "Yes?" "You've been quiet lately, more than usual. Is everything well?" She almost laughed. 7 years of being invisible, and now he noticed she was quiet. "Everything's fine," she said. He accepted this with visible relief and left. Elara sat very still. Then she walked to her desk, unlocked the drawer, and pulled out her journal. June 18th. Dee asked if I was well. The answer is no. I'm not well. I'm disappearing. Every day, a little more of me vanishes, and soon there will be nothing left but a well-organized house and a daughter who barely knows her own father. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know if it can be fixed, but I know I can't keep living like this. The invitation arrived in July. Lord and Lady Castellan were hosting a birthday celebration for Lady Castellan's 40th year, a grand affair, 200 guests, orchestra, the works. And as was customary for such events, they requested that the Duke and Duchess of Ashmont attend together. Elara and Darian rarely appeared in public as a couple anymore. Most social events allowed them to circulate separately. But this would require them to arrive together, to dance together, to maintain the illusion of a functioning marriage in front of the entire realm's high society. Darian, predictably, looked pained when he read the invitation. They discussed it over breakfast, one of the few meals he still occasionally attended, though usually while reading correspondence. "We'll need to coordinate our schedules," he said, not looking up from his letters. "Yes. Seraphine will be there, of course. She's quite close with Lady Castellan. Of course." He finally looked up. "Is that going to be a problem?" Elara set down her teacup with exquisite care. "Why would it be a problem? He seemed to struggle for words. "I know people talk." "People always talk, Darian. That's what people do." "It's not what they think." He said it quickly, defensively. "Seraphine is a business associate. The Blackwood shipping contracts are crucial to our trade agreements. I haven't said otherwise. You," he frowned, "you never say anything. Would you like me to?" He looked at her like she'd spoken in a foreign language. Then his secretary appeared at the door with some urgent message, and the conversation ended before it had truly begun. Elara spent the next week preparing for the ball with the same careful attention she brought to everything. She had a new gown made, a deep emerald that brought out the green in her hazel eyes, elegant without being ostentatious. She practiced her smile in the mirror, rehearsed polite conversations, prepared herself to be on display. The night of the ball, she was ready. What she hadn't prepared for was walking into the Castellans' ballroom and seeing Seraphine Blackwood wearing a nearly identical emerald gown, standing next to Darian, laughing. It wasn't intentional, Elara knew that. Or maybe it was. There were only so many dressmakers in the capital, and Seraphine certainly had the connections to find out what the Duchess of Ashmont had ordered. But intentional or not, the effect was devastating. Two women in matching dresses, the wife and the mistress, like some cruel cosmic joke. Elara saw the moment people noticed, saw the whispers start, the glances, the poorly concealed amusement. Darian saw too. He had the decency to look uncomfortable. Elara, It's fine, she said. Her voice came from somewhere far away. These things happen. She spent the first hour of the ball doing what she did best. Being gracious, being charming, pretending everything was fine. She danced with Lord Vernon, with young Lord Pembroke, with a dozen other men whose names she barely registered. Through it all, she watched Darian and Seraphine, watched the easy way they stood together, the comfortable intimacy of their conversation. He smiled at her the way he used to smile at Elara, a lifetime ago. The thing that finally broke her wasn't dramatic. It was small, almost trivial. She saw Seraphine adjust Darian's collar, a gesture of casual intimacy, the kind of thing a wife might do. And Darian didn't pull away. He laughed, said something Elara couldn't hear, and let this other woman touch him as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Elara excused herself from her dance partner and walked very calmly to the ladies' retiring room. She locked herself in a private chamber, and then, finally, she allowed herself to feel it. Not sadness, not even anger, just a clarity so sharp it hurt. She had been trying to save a marriage that only she was invested in saving. She had been managing an estate for a man who didn't value her contributions. She had been raising a daughter alone while pretending she had a partner. She had been living a lie, and she was done. When she emerged from the retiring room 20 minutes later, her eyes were dry and her mind was made up. She found Darian near the refreshment table, Seraphine at his side as always. "Darian, I need to speak with you." He looked annoyed at the interruption. "Can it wait? Lord Ashford and I are discussing—" "No," she said. "It can't." Something in her voice made him stop, made Seraphine take a small step back. Elara didn't want to do this here, in front of everyone. But maybe that was the point. Maybe she needed witnesses. Maybe she needed to make it real. "I'm leaving," she said. The words felt strange in her mouth. Foreign, but true. Darian blinked. "Leaving? The ball is barely—" "No, I'm leaving you." The conversations around them died. Silence rippled outward from where they stood. A stone dropped in still water. Darian stared at her. "What?" "I'm taking Roslyn and I'm leaving. You can keep the estate, the title, the business, all of it. I don't want any of it. I just want to stop being invisible." "Elara, you're being dramatic. I negotiated the Varenzia contracts. I saved the Ashmont estate from bankruptcy. I maintain every political alliance that keeps this family powerful. I run this household, raise our daughter, and manage every aspect of the life you take credit for. And you don't even see me." Her voice wasn't loud, but everyone heard it. The ballroom had gone completely silent. "I have spent 7 years disappearing," she continued, "and I'm done. I'm done being furniture in a house I built. I'm done being married to a man who doesn't know me. I'm done pretending this is a partnership when I've been alone from the beginning." Darian's face had gone pale. "This isn't the place?" "There's never a place, Darian. There's never a time. So here's as good as any." She reached into her bag and pulled out the leather journal, the one where she'd documented everything. She set it on the table between them. "Read that if you want to understand what you're losing, or don't. I don't care anymore." She turned to go, then stopped. Seraphine was standing there, looking uncomfortable for the first time since Elara had known her. Elara reached up and removed her wedding ring, a simple gold band that had felt heavier every year she wore it. She placed it carefully on the table next to the journal. "You can have it," she said to Seraphine. "Not cruel, not bitter, just tired. Heaven knows he pays more attention to you." Then she walked out. Behind her, the ballroom erupted into chaos. Whispers, gasps, shocked murmurs. She heard Darian call her name, but she didn't stop, didn't look back. She walked out of the Castellan estate, found her carriage, and gave the driver a single instruction. Home. I need to pack. As the carriage pulled away, she looked out the window at the glittering ballroom, at the life she was leaving behind, and for the first time in 7 years, Elara Whitcomb felt like she could breathe. The servants heard about it before she even arrived home. Elara could see it in their faces when she walked through the door. The wide eyes, the hushed whispers that stopped the moment she entered a room. News traveled fast in their world, carried on the tongues of coachmen and ladies' maids, spreading through the servant networks faster than any official messenger could ride. The Duchess of Ashmont had walked out on her husband, in front of everyone, at the Castellan ball. Mrs. Halloway met her in the foyer, her expression carefully neutral. Your Grace, I need to pack, Elara said. Tonight, just essentials. I'll send for the rest later. Of course. Mrs. Halloway didn't ask questions, didn't offer opinions. She simply nodded and began giving quiet orders to the staff. Elara climbed the stairs to Rosalind's room. Her daughter was asleep, curled around her favorite stuffed rabbit, a worn thing that Elara had sewn herself when Rosalind was 2. The girl's face was peaceful in sleep, unaware that her world was about to shift. Elara sat on the edge of the bed and gently shook her daughter's shoulder. Rosalind, sweetheart, wake up. Gray eyes blinked open, Darian's eyes in her daughter's face. Mama? We're going on a trip. Now? Rosalind sat up, confused. It's dark. I know, but we need to go tonight. Can you be brave for me? Rosalind studied her mother's face with a seriousness that made Elara's heart ache. 7 years old and already learning to read the spaces between words. Is Papa coming? No, sweetheart. It's just us. Is he angry? Elara pulled her daughter close. This isn't about anger. This is about making things better. You trust me, don't you? Rosalind nodded against her shoulder. Then get dressed. Warm clothes. We'll make it an adventure. 20 minutes later, they were loading a single trunk into a carriage. Elara had packed quickly. Clothes for her and Rosalind, a few books, some jewelry she could sell if necessary, and the leather journal she'd left on the table at the ball. Darian wouldn't have touched it, she knew. He never touched anything that might require actual emotional engagement. Mrs. Halloway appeared with a basket of food and a thick envelope. Provisions for the journey, and this. She pressed the envelope into Elara's hands. From the household fund. Don't argue. Elara looked down at the envelope. It was heavy with coin. Mrs. Halloway, I can't. You've been paying us above standard wages for 3 years from your personal allowance, Mrs. Halloway said quietly. We all knew. We all noticed. This is a fraction of what you're owed. Elara's throat tightened. Thank you. Where will you go? The cottage in Millbrook. Mrs. Halloway nodded. The cottage had been part of Elara's dowry, a small property an hour's ride from the capital, barely more than a hunting lodge. Elara had never visited it, had almost forgotten it existed. It's not much, Mrs. Halloway warned. It's mine, that's enough. The older woman's expression softened. He'll come after you. Let him. Elara climbed into the carriage. Rosalind was already curled up on the seat, clutching her rabbit. As the carriage pulled away from Ashmont House, Elara looked back once. The windows glowed with warm light, making the stone facade look almost welcoming. A beautiful prison was still a prison. She didn't look back again. The cottage in Millbrook was worse than she'd imagined. They arrived just after dawn to find a building that looked like it had been abandoned for a decade, which, essentially, it had. The roof sagged in one corner, the windows were thick with grime. The front door stuck in its frame and required 3 hard shoves to open. Inside, dust covered everything. The furniture was old and moth-eaten. There were exactly 4 rooms, a main living area with a fireplace, a tiny kitchen, and 2 bedrooms barely large enough to fit a bed each. Rosalind stood in the doorway, her rabbit dangling from one hand, her face carefully blank. It's a bit rough, Elara admitted, but we'll fix it up, make it ours. Where's my governess going to sleep? We won't have a governess here, sweetheart, just us. Rosalind processed this. What about the cook and the maids? No staff either. We'll take care of ourselves. Her daughter's eyes went wide. Can you cook? It was a fair question. Elara had been managing a household for 7 years but had never actually prepared a meal herself. That's what cooks were for. I'll learn, she said, with more confidence than she felt. The first week was brutal. Elara had never realized how much work went into simply existing. There was no staff to light fires, to prepare meals, to clean, to manage the endless small tasks that made a house function. Everything fell to her. She burned the first 3 dinners she attempted. The fourth was edible but bland. By the end of the week, she'd mastered exactly one recipe, a simple stew that tasted like poverty, but at least kept them fed. Rosalind, to her credit, didn't complain. She helped where she could, learning to sweep floors and fold clothes. But Elara could see the confusion in her daughter's eyes. The questions that remained unasked. Why are we here? When are we going home? Where's Papa? On the 8th day, Darian arrived. Elara heard the carriage before she saw it, the expensive rattle of well-maintained wheels on the rough country road. She was in the garden, trying to coax life from the overgrown vegetable patch, her hands dirty and her dress stained with soil. She stood as the carriage pulled up, wiping her hands on her apron. Darian stepped out, looking immaculate in his traveling coat, his expression somewhere between angry and bewildered. He stared at the cottage, at the peeling paint and sagging roof, at Elara, standing there in a work dress with dirt under her fingernails. "What is this?" he said. "This is where I live now." "Elara, this is ridiculous. Come home. This is home." He moved closer, lowering his voice. "You're being childish. Making a scene at the ball was one thing, but this? Running away to a hovel in the middle of nowhere? I'm not running away, I'm leaving. There's a difference." "Over what? Because of Seraphine?" He said the name like it tasted bad. "Nothing has happened between us. She's a business associate." "I don't care about Seraphine, Mate," Elara said, and was surprised to find she meant it. "This isn't about her. It's about you, about us, about the fact that you haven't seen me in years." "That's not true." "When is my birthday, Darian?" He blinked. "What?" "My birthday. When is it?" He opened his mouth, closed it. His face went blank. "September 14th, Elara said quietly. "We've been married for 7 years. You've missed it 4 times. The other 3 years you were home but didn't remember until I mentioned it at dinner. I've been busy. What's Rosalind's favorite color?" "Elara, this is absurd. Answer the question, your daughter's favorite color. What is it?" He looked genuinely distressed now. "I don't." "Blue? Most children like blue." "Yellow. It's been yellow since she was 4, she told you last month at breakfast. You were reading correspondence and said, 'That's nice, dear,' without looking up." Darian's jaw tightened. "I provide for this family. I maintain our position, our wealth." "I maintained it," Elara said. "I negotiated the contracts. I managed the alliances. I saved the estate from your father's debts. You just showed up and took credit. That's not fair. Read the journal." "What journal?" "The one I left on the table at the ball. Did you even look at it?" His silence was answer enough. Elara felt something settle in her chest. Not anger, not even disappointment, just certainty. "Go home, Darian. I'm not coming back." "You can't just leave. What will people say?" "I don't care what people say. I'm done living my life based on what people say." He stared at her, and for a moment she thought he might actually argue, actually fight for her. Instead, he straightened his coat and said, "You're making a mistake." "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." He left without seeing Rosalind, didn't even ask about her, just climbed into his carriage and rode away, leaving dust hanging in the air. Rosalind appeared in the doorway, rabbit in hand. "Was that Papa?" "Yes." "He didn't come inside." "No, sweetheart, he didn't." "Is he angry?" Elara pulled her daughter close. "I don't know what he is, but we're going to be fine, I promise." It was a promise she desperately hoped she could keep. The village of Millbrook had opinions about the Duchess of Ashmont, and none of them were kind. Elara learned this on her first trip to the market. She'd walked into the village square with her basket, planning to buy vegetables and maybe some fabric to make new curtains. The moment people recognized her, the whispers started. That's her, the one who left her husband. Scandalous, that's what it is. Poor Duke Whitcomb, and that child growing up without a father. Elara kept her head high and approached the vegetable stall. The merchant, a round-faced woman named Mrs. Pepper, looked at her with barely concealed disapproval. "I need potatoes," Elara said, "and carrots, if you have fresh ones." Mrs. Pepper named a price that was easily double what Elara had seen her charge the previous customer. "That seems high," Elara said carefully. "Prices have gone up." Mrs. Pepper's expression dared her to argue. Elara could have argued, could have pointed out the obvious inflation, the petty cruelty of it. Instead, she paid. She needed the vegetables more than she needed her pride. At the fabric stall, the story repeated. Inflated prices, cold service, barely concealed judgment. By the time she left the market, her small purse was significantly lighter, and her resolve was being tested. She understood what was happening. To the people of Millbrook, she wasn't a woman who'd left an unhappy marriage. She was a duchess who'd abandoned her duties, violated the natural order, embarrassed her husband publicly. In their eyes, she deserved whatever hardship came her way. Back at the cottage, she found a letter waiting. Not from Darian, she'd learned not to expect those, but from Lady Pembroke, the sweet young wife who'd admired her roses. "Dear Elara," it began, using her first name with a familiarity that felt deliberate. "I hope this letter finds you well, though I confess I'm shocked by recent events. Your behavior at the ball has been the talk of society, and not in a favorable way. Many of us had considered you a friend, but your actions have made that association complicated. I thought you should know that Lady Castellan has removed your name from her guest lists, and several others plan to do the same. The scandal you've created has made you unwelcome in polite society. Perhaps in time, if you reconcile with the Duke and apologize for your outburst, some doors may reopen. Until then, I'm afraid we cannot maintain our acquaintance. I do hope you understand." Elara set the letter down carefully. Didn't crumple it, didn't tear it, just set it aside and went to check on dinner. That evening, as she and Rosalind ate their simple stew, her daughter asked, "Mama, why don't we have visitors?" "We're still settling in, sweetheart, but at the big house, people visited all the time." "This isn't the big house. Things are different here." Rosalind was quiet for a moment, pushing vegetables around her bowl. "Are we poor now?" The question hit harder than it should have. "No, we have enough. But we don't have servants, and our house is small, and the ladies at the market were mean to you. I heard them." Elara reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. "We have what matters. We have each other. We have a roof and food and safety. That's more than many people have." "But Papa has more." "Yes, he does. Don't you miss it, the big house and the nice dresses and all the people?" Elara thought about it honestly. Did she miss the luxury, the comfort? Sometimes. But she didn't miss feeling invisible. Didn't miss the loneliness that had somehow been worse when surrounded by people. "I miss some things," she said, "but I don't miss being unhappy." Rosalind seemed to accept this, though Elara could see the wheels turning in her young mind, trying to understand why having less could somehow be better. 3 weeks into their new life, the true cost of Elara's decision became clear. A letter arrived from the Whitcomb family solicitor. Formal, cold, laying out the terms of what amounted to a financial siege. The household accounts that Elara had managed, frozen. Her access to the estate funds, revoked. Her personal allowance, stopped. Even the small inheritance from her father, which had been held in trust by the duchy, inaccessible. She was being cut off. Systematically, thoroughly, legally. The letter included one additional note. The Duke is willing to negotiate a reasonable settlement, provided the Duchess returns to Ashmont House and ceases this unfortunate episode. Elara sat in the cottage's tiny kitchen, reading the letter 3 times, feeling the walls close in. She'd known this might happen, had prepared for it mentally, but the reality was still crushing. She had the money Mrs. Halloway had given her, some jewelry she could sell. The cottage itself. It was more than nothing, but it wasn't enough to sustain them indefinitely. She needed income, needed a way to support herself and Rosalind that didn't depend on Darian's mercy. The problem was that duchesses weren't trained for employment. She could manage a household, negotiate social contracts, organize events, all skills that were valuable in her former world, but worthless here. She couldn't sew professionally, couldn't cook well enough to sell food, had no trade or craft. She was educated, intelligent, capable, and completely unprepared to earn a living. That night, she went through her jewelry box, sorting pieces by value. The pearl necklace from her wedding, valuable but sentimental. The emerald earrings Darian had given her after Rosalind's birth, worth more, less emotional weight. The diamond bracelet that had belonged to his mother, worth a fortune but impossible to sell without causing a scandal. She was trying to decide which pieces she could part with when Rosalind appeared in the doorway. "Can't sleep?" Elara asked. "Are we going to be okay?" Elara started to offer reassurance, then stopped. Rosalind deserved honesty. "I don't know yet, but I'm working on it." "What if Papa won't give us money?" "Then we'll find another way." "How?" "I don't know that either, but we will." Rosalind came and sat beside her, looking at the jewelry spread across the table. "You could sell my dresses, the fancy ones from the big house. I don't need them here." Elara's throat tightened. "You might need them someday." "Or we could sell them and eat," Rosalind said with the brutal practicality of a child. "I vote for eating." Despite everything, Elara laughed. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You were just too busy to notice." It was said without malice, just matter of fact, but it landed like a blow. Elara pulled her daughter close. "I'm sorry, for all of it, for the big house and the busy schedule and not paying enough attention." "You paid more attention than Papa," Rosalind said. "At least you know my favorite color." They sat there in the lamplight, surrounded by jewels that might or might not save them, and Elara made a decision. She would find a way. Not for herself. She'd already accepted the hard road she'd chosen. But for Rosalind. Her daughter deserved better than poverty enforced by a father's pride. The next morning, Elara visited every business in Millbrook. The dressmaker didn't need help. The general store already had staff. The inn was run by family and wasn't hiring. By the fifth rejection, a pattern emerged. People were willing to let the disgraced Duchess struggle. She was leaving the bakery, another polite refusal, when she nearly collided with a woman carrying a stack of books. "Sorry," Elara said automatically, helping gather the fallen volumes. "No harm done." The woman was perhaps 40, with graying hair and sharp eyes. "You're the Duchess, aren't you? The one everyone's talking about." Elara braced for judgment. "I am. Margaret Thorne, I run the school." She gestured to a small building across the square. "I heard you were looking for work." "News travels fast." "In Millbrook, always." Margaret studied her. "Can you read?" "Of course." "Write? Do arithmetic?" "Yes." "Languages?" "My previous teacher knew French and Latin." "Ah, I know both, and some Varensian." Margaret's eyebrows rose. "Educated, then. Not just a pretty face and a title." It was the first non-hostile comment Elara had received in Millbrook, and she almost didn't know how to respond to it. "I can't pay much," Margaret continued. "Half what you'd get in the capital, and the work is hard. 20 children, ages 5 to 14, all in one room. Some of them are rougher than you're used to. Farmers' kids, not lords' children." "I can handle it." "But can you? Because they'll test you. They'll push and see if the fancy Duchess breaks. And if you do, I can't have that disruption." Elara thought about the past 3 weeks. The burned dinners and dirty hands, the cold market vendors and colder letters, the slow collapse of everything she'd known. "I won't break," she said. Margaret looked at her for a long moment. "Monday morning, 6 o'clock. Don't be late." "I won't." "And Duchess?" Margaret's expression softened slightly. "I don't care what you did or didn't do to your husband. Here, you're just another teacher. That title won't impress the children, and it won't excuse poor work." "Good," Elara said. "I'm tired of the title anyway." That weekend she prepared, read through every book in the cottage's small library, practiced writing lessons on scraps of paper, tried to remember what it felt like to be young and learning. Sunday night, she could barely sleep, not from fear, from something that felt dangerously like hope. Monday morning arrived cold and gray. Elara dressed in her simplest dress, tied her hair back, and walked to the school with Rosalind in tow. The schoolhouse was a single room with rough wooden benches and a chalkboard that had seen better days. The children were already there, ranging from tiny ones barely old enough to hold a pencil to gangly teenagers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. They stared at her with undisguised curiosity. Whispers rippled through the room. "That's the Duchess. The one who ran away. My ma says she's a scandal." Margaret appeared at Elara's elbow. "Children, this is Mrs. Whitcomb. She'll be assisting with lessons." Mrs. Whitcomb, not Duchess, not Your Grace, just Mrs. It felt strange and liberating at the same time. "Good morning," Elara said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. A boy in the back, maybe 13, with the build of someone who worked in the fields, raised his hand. "Is it true you left your husband at a ball in front of everyone?" "Thomas," Margaret warned, "I'm just asking what everyone wants to know." Elara looked at the sea of faces, all of them waiting to see if she'd lie or deflect or play the Duchess. "Yes," she said simply. "I did." "Why?" This from a girl in the front, younger, with genuine curiosity rather than malice. "Because I was unhappy, and I decided I'd rather be poor and honest than rich and miserable." "Are you poor now?" the girl asked. "Compared to before?" "Yes." "Do you regret it?" Elara thought about the cottage with its leaking roof, the market vendors who overcharged her, the jewelry she'd sold last week to buy winter coats, the way Rosalind had learned to help cook without complaint. "No," she said, "I don't." The children seemed to accept this. Thomas in the back nodded like she'd passed some test. The young girl smiled. "Now," Elara said, picking up a piece of chalk, "who can tell me what they know about grammar?" The day was chaos. The children were loud, energetic, and completely unlike the docile students she'd imagined. They interrupted, argued, threw things when they thought she wasn't looking. By noon, Elara's voice was hoarse and her head was pounding, but she didn't break. When the final child left at 3 o'clock, Margaret found her sitting at the desk, exhausted. "Well," Margaret said, you survived day 1. Barely. That's more than my last assistant managed. She quit after 2 hours." Margaret paused. "You did well, better than I expected." "They're good children, just energetic. They're devils in small bodies, and they'll make your life miserable if you let them. But yes, they're good." Margaret hesitated. "I heard what you said, about being poor and honest. I meant it. I believe you. The question is whether you'll still mean it in 6 months when winter hits and the roof leaks and you're wearing the same 3 dresses on rotation. I guess we'll find out." Margaret nodded. "I guess we will." Elara collected Rosalind, who'd spent the day in class with the younger children and seemed to have made friends, and walked home. Her feet hurt, her back ached, and she'd earned less in a day than she used to spend on a single dinner party. But when she lay down that night, she slept better than she had in years. 2 months into her new life, autumn arrived with a vengeance. The cottage roof leaked in 3 places. Elara learned to position buckets strategically and pray the storms weren't too violent. The children at school had gradually accepted her, some faster than others. Thomas, the boy who'd challenged her on the first day, had become an unlikely ally, helping wrangle the younger students. The small girl, whose name was Penny, followed Elara around like a shadow, soaking up every word. Rosalind was changing too. The soft, sheltered child who'd grown up in Ashmont House was becoming someone tougher. She no longer complained about the simple food or the cold mornings. She'd made friends with Penny and 2 other girls from school. Elara would hear them playing outside, their laughter bright against the gray sky. But the financial pressure was constant. Teaching paid enough to keep them fed, but not much beyond that. Elara had sold most of her good jewelry. The few pieces she'd kept, sentimental things, sat in their box like a timer counting down to the moment when she'd have to sell those too. Then, on a rainy October afternoon, everything got worse. Elara was teaching a lesson on geography when the schoolhouse door burst open. A young man in Whitcomb livery stood there, rain dripping from his coat. "Mrs. Whitcomb," he said, "there's been an accident." The world tilted. Roslyn? No, ma'am. The Duke. He's asking for you. He's been hurt. Elara's first instinct was to refuse, to say that whatever happened to Darian Whitcomb was no longer her concern. But the messenger looked genuinely distressed, and despite everything, 7 years of marriage didn't disappear overnight. How bad? She asked. Bad enough that he's asking for you. She made arrangements for Margaret to watch Roslyn, borrowed a horse, and rode through the rain to Ashmont House. She hadn't been back since the night she'd left, and approaching it now felt surreal. The building looked the same, grand, imposing, cold. Mrs. Halloway met her at the door. He's in his room. The doctor's with him. What happened? Riding accident. The horse spooked. He fell badly. Elara climbed the familiar stairs to the private wing. Darian's room, she'd been in it so rarely during their marriage, was now filled with lamplight and the sharp smell of medicinal alcohol. The doctor looked up as she entered. Duchess. Good. Perhaps you can talk sense into him. Darian was propped up in bed, his right leg in a splint, his face pale with pain. When he saw her, something complicated crossed his expression. Elara. What did you do? She meant to sound cold, but it came out almost fond. Old habits. I was riding. The horse saw a snake. I fell. He grimaced. The doctor says my leg is broken in 2 places. He needs to stay off it for at least 2 months, the doctor added. Complete rest, but he's insisting on continuing his work. I have responsibilities, Darian interrupted. Contracts to negotiate, meetings, which someone else can handle, Elara said. Who? You? It came out bitter. If necessary. He laughed, then winced as the movement jarred his leg. You walked out, remember? You're not part of this anymore. Then why did you send for me? He was quiet for a moment. I don't know. The doctor cleared his throat. I'll give you 2 a moment. He left, closing the door behind him. Elara stood by the bed, looking at this man she'd married, this stranger she'd lived with for 7 years. He looked diminished somehow, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. The estate is falling apart, he said finally. Small things at first, then bigger ones. The Varenzia contracts you mentioned. They're threatening to pull out because negotiations broke down. The household staff is in chaos. The steward quit last week. Why did he quit? Because I yelled at him for incompetence. Apparently he's been asking me for decisions on things for weeks, and I've been... He trailed off. Ignoring them? Elara supplied. The way you ignored me? That's not fair. Isn't it? She moved to the window, looking out at the ground she used to walk. You sent for me because everything's falling apart, and you finally realized you need me. Not as a wife, as a manager, as someone who does the work you don't want to do. Elara, I'm not coming back, Darian. Not to save the estate, not to manage your affairs, not even to help you while you recover. I gave you 7 years. I'm done. She turned to leave, and his voice stopped her. She's gone. Elara paused. Who? Seraphine. She left 3 weeks ago, went back to her family's estates. His laugh was hollow. Apparently, a duke without his competent wife isn't as attractive. I'm sorry, Elara said, and was surprised to find she meant it. Not for him, for the waste of it all. Are you happy? He asked. In that cottage? Teaching farmers' children? Living in poverty? She thought about it. The leaking roof and the simple food, the children who challenged her every day, the ache in her back from scrubbing floors, the pride of earning her own way. Happier than I was here, she said. She left him there, walked back down the grand staircase, and rode home through the rain. When she arrived at the cottage, Roslyn was waiting. Is Papa okay? He'll be fine. He broke his leg. Are you going back to take care of him? Elara looked at her daughter's face, reading the worry there. No, sweetheart. We're staying here. Even though he needs you? He doesn't need me. He needs someone to manage his life for him. That's not the same thing. Roslyn seemed to understand. Good. I like it here better anyway. Penny invited me to help with their harvest festival. Can I go? Of course. Later that night, after Roslyn was asleep, Elara sat by the fire and realized something had shifted. Seeing Darian broken and vulnerable hadn't made her want to return. It had only confirmed that she'd made the right choice. Whatever came next, poverty, struggle, uncertainty, she would face it. But she would face it free. And that made all the difference. And that made all the difference. Until winter arrived. The first snow came in early November, light and almost pretty. Elara stood at the cottage window, watching it fall, thinking it looked like something from a painting. By the second snowfall a week later, she'd learned that snow in paintings was a lot more romantic than snow in reality when your roof had 3 leaks and your firewood supply was running low. "Mama, I'm cold," Rosalind said from her makeshift study corner, a wooden crate turned on its side with books stacked inside. "Put on your heavy shawl, sweetheart. I'll build up the fire." Elara added the last of their good firewood to the hearth, the cheaper stuff she'd bought from the village merchant. Green wood that smoked more than it burned sat in a damp pile outside. She'd have to use it soon. The money was running out faster than she'd calculated. Teaching paid enough for food, but barely. The roof repairs she'd attempted herself had failed spectacularly during the last storm. The bucket brigade in the bedroom was now 4 buckets deep. She'd sold the last of her jewelry except for her mother's wedding band, which she couldn't bring herself to part with yet being the operative word. That afternoon at school, Thomas approached her during the lunch break. The boy had shot up 3 inches in the past months and now towered over her. "Mrs. Whitcomb, my pa says you're having trouble with your firewood." Elara tried to keep her expression neutral. "Your father talks about my firewood?" "Whole village talks about you, ma'am. Can't help it in a place this size." He shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "But Pa says if you need help splitting wood, I could come by. After school. He says it ain't right. A woman and a child in that cottage with winter coming." Pride warred with practicality. Pride was losing. "That's very kind, Thomas, but I can't pay you." "Didn't ask for payment, asked if you needed help." Something in Elara's chest cracked a little. "Yes, I need help." Thomas showed up that Saturday with an axe and his younger brother. They spent 4 hours splitting wood while Elara made them lunch. Her stew had gotten better with practice, at least. When they left, she had enough firewood to last 2 weeks. "Thank you," she said. The words felt inadequate. Thomas just nodded. "We'll come back next month, if you need it." She did need it, hated needing it, but accepted it anyway because Rosalind's teeth were chattering at night, and pride couldn't keep a child warm. That night, Rosalind developed a cough. Just a small thing at first, barely noticeable. By morning, it was worse. By evening, Elara was worried. By midnight, she was terrified. The fever came on fast. One moment, Rosalind was complaining her throat hurt. The next, she was burning up, shaking with chills under every blanket Elara owned. "Mama, I'm cold." "I know, baby, I know." Elara pressed a cool cloth to her daughter's forehead. Too hot. Way too hot. She needed a doctor. The village had one. Dr. Morris, an elderly man who'd been practicing medicine since before Elara was born. She'd met him once at the market. He'd been polite but distant, like everyone else. Elara wrapped Rosalind in blankets and carried her through the snow to the doctor's house. Her daughter felt too light, too fragile. When had she gotten so thin? Dr. Morris answered the door in his nightshirt, lamp in hand. He took one look at Rosalind and his expression shifted from annoyed to professional. "Bring her in, quickly." His examination room was warm and smelled of herbs. He laid Rosalind on the table and began his assessment, checking her throat, listening to her breathing, feeling the glands in her neck. "How long has she had the fever?" he asked. "It started this evening, but the cough has been building for days." "Has she been eating?" Elara's stomach clenched. "Less than usual. I thought she was just being picky." Dr. Morris's expression was carefully neutral as he completed his examination. Finally, he stepped back. "It's scarlet fever." The words hit like a physical blow. Scarlet fever. Children died from scarlet fever. "Are you sure? See the rash starting on her chest, the strawberry tongue?" "Yes, I'm sure." He began preparing something at his workbench. She needs constant care, fever management, fluids, rest. The next 72 hours are critical. What can I do? Keep her cool when the fever spikes. Make sure she drinks. Water, broth, whatever she'll take. Watch for the rash spreading. If she starts having trouble breathing, come get me immediately. He handed her a small bottle. Willow bark extract for the fever. 2 drops in water every 4 hours. Elara took the bottle with shaking hands. How much do I owe you? We'll settle accounts later. Right now, focus on your daughter. She carried Rosalind home through the snow, each step careful, each breath a prayer to nothing in particular. Inside the cottage, she set up a vigil by her daughter's bedside. The hours blurred together. Fever spiked. Elara cooled it with wet cloths. Rosalind shook with chills. Elara piled on blankets. The rash spread across her daughter's chest and arms, angry and red. Elara tried not to panic. By the second day, Rosalind was barely conscious. She'd stopped complaining about being cold or hot or uncomfortable. She just lay there, eyes half open, breathing too fast. Rosalind, sweetheart, you need to drink. Elara held a cup to her daughter's lips. Just a little, please. Rosalind's eyes focused on her, glazed with fever. Is Papa coming? The question broke something. Do you want him to come? I don't know. Maybe. I'm scared, Mama. I know, baby, but you're going to be fine. You're strong. You always say that. But what if I'm not? Elara had no answer. She just held her daughter's hand and kept the vigil. On the 3rd day, someone knocked. Elara dragged herself to the door, exhausted and terrified, to find Margaret from the school standing there with a basket. Heard about Rosalind, Margaret said. Brought soup and bread. How is she? Not good. Elara's voice cracked. The fever won't break. Margaret stepped inside without asking permission. She looked at Rosalind, then at Elara. When's the last time you slept? I don't know, yesterday? Maybe. You're no good to her exhausted. I'll sit with her. You rest. I can't. Yes, you can. 2 hours. I'll wake you if anything changes. Elara wanted to argue but didn't have the strength. She collapsed on her own bed and was asleep in seconds. She woke to Margaret shaking her shoulder. Elara, someone's here. Elara stumbled into the main room, still half asleep. A man stood by the door, snow on his shoulders, expensive coat marking him as someone from a different world. It took her a moment to recognize him. Lord Vernon? She'd danced with him at a dozen balls. He was one of Darian's business associates. Mrs. Whitcomb. He looked uncomfortable. I heard about your daughter. I came to offer assistance. That's kind, but the Duke sent me, Vernon interrupted. He heard about the child's illness. He wants to bring her back to Ashmont House. The physicians there are better equipped. No. The word came out flat and hard. Vernon blinked. I understand there's tension between you and your husband, but surely the child's welfare. My daughter stays with me. Mrs. Whitcomb, be reasonable. You're living in poverty in a cottage that's barely standing. The child is seriously ill. Ashmont House has resources you don't. Heat, physicians, medication. And what does Darian want in return, Otom? Elara asked. Let me guess. I come back too. Play the dutiful wife, pretend the last 6 months never happened. Vernon had the grace to look ashamed. He wants his family back. He wants his manager back, his household organizer, someone to fix the mess he's made. Elara moved to the door, opening it. Tell the Duke thank you for his concern, but we're managing. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, you're letting pride kill your daughter. The accusation hit like a slap. Elara's hand tightened on the doorframe. Get out! Elara, shh! Get out! Vernon left. Elara stood in the doorway watching snow fall, wondering if he was right. If her pride was worth more than Rosalind's life. If she was being stubborn or strong or just stupid. Margaret appeared beside her. You did the right thing. Did I? What if she dies because I wouldn't? She's not dying. Her fever broke an hour ago while you were sleeping. She's going to be fine. Elara's knees went weak. What? Come see. Rosalind was awake, pale but conscious, sipping water from a cup. When she saw Elara, she managed a weak smile. Mama, you look terrible. Elara laughed and cried at the same time, gathering her daughter close. You scared me. I scared me too. Rosalind's voice was raspy but improving. Did I hear Papa's friend? Is he still here? No, sweetheart. He left. Oh. Rosalind was quiet for a moment. Are we going back to the big house? No, we're staying here. Good. I like it better here, even when I'm sick. Over the next week, Rosalind recovered slowly. The fever stayed down, the rash faded, color returned to her cheeks. Dr. Morris visited twice to check on her and refused payment both times, which made Elara suspicious until she overheard him talking to Margaret. Someone's got to look after them, he said. Whole village treating her like a criminal for leaving a bad marriage. It's shameful. Not everyone, Margaret said. Some of us remember what it's like to make hard choices. Elara filed that information away. Not everyone hated her, just most people. Rosalind's illness had cost them what little financial cushion Elara had left. The medicine, the extra firewood to keep the cottage warm, the food she couldn't prepare because she was too busy nursing her daughter. It all added up. By mid-November, Elara was looking at her mother's wedding band and trying to calculate how much it might fetch. Then the letter arrived. Not from Darien this time. From the Ashmont family solicitor. Formal. Legal. Devastating. Mrs. Whitcomb, it has come to the Duke's attention that you are living in circumstances unfit for raising the heir's daughter. As such, he is filing for custody of the child Rosalind Whitcomb, citing neglect and inadequate living conditions. A hearing has been scheduled for December 15th. You are required to appear. Failure to do so will result in automatic custody transfer. Elara read it 3 times, each word sinking in like a stone. He was trying to take Rosalind. She found Margaret at the school. I need help. Margaret read the letter, her expression darkening. That bastard. Can he do this? Legally? I don't know. You need a solicitor. Margaret paused. Do you have money for a solicitor? No. Then we need to find you one who will work for something other than money. Finding a solicitor willing to take on the Duke of Ashmont in a custody dispute for a client with no money was exactly as difficult as it sounded. Elara spent a week visiting every legal office within riding distance. Most turned her away at the door. The few who listened quoted fees she couldn't possibly afford. She was leaving the 5th rejection when she noticed a small office tucked between a cobbler and a bakery. The sign read, A. Fletcher, Legal Services. The office was cramped and cluttered with papers. A woman sat at the desk, late 30s, dark hair pulled back severely, eyes that missed nothing. Can I help you? I need a solicitor, but I should tell you up front I can't pay. The woman's eyebrow rose. Then why are you here? Because my husband is trying to take my daughter, and I need someone who understands that not all fights are about money. Something shifted in the woman's expression. Sit down. Tell me everything. Elara told her. The marriage, the invisibility, the ball, the cottage, Rosalind's illness, the custody filing. All of it. When she finished, the woman, Anne Fletcher, sat back in her chair. The Duke has resources, connections. He'll paint you as an unstable woman who abandoned her duties and is now living in poverty. I know. They'll argue you can't provide for the child. That Ashmont house is objectively better for her welfare. I know that too. So why fight? Why not negotiate shared custody? Visit on holidays, summers? Because he doesn't want her, Elara said. He wants to punish me. And I won't let my daughter become a weapon in his war. Anne Fletcher studied her for a long moment. I had a husband once. Good man, everyone said. Respected. Successful. Her voice went flat. He hit me. For 5 years, he hit me. And I thought it was my fault. Thought I could fix it if I just tried harder. One day I realized I was going to die if I stayed. So I left. Lost everything. My home, my standing, most of my family. I'm sorry. Don't be. I rebuilt, studied law, became a solicitor. And now I spend my time helping women who society says don't deserve help. She pulled out a sheet of paper. I'll take your case. No fee. But you need to understand this is going to get ugly. He'll use everything against you. Every mistake. Every hardship. I understand. Do you? Because I need to know you won't break. I need to know you'll fight, even when it hurts. Elara thought about the past 6 months. The burned dinners and cold nights. The market vendors who overcharged her, and the society friends who'd abandoned her. Rosalind's fever and her own exhaustion. All of it. "I won't break," she said. Anne Fletcher smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who'd been through hell and learned to navigate it. "Good, then let's go to war." The hearing was scheduled for December 15th, 3 weeks away. Anne spent that time building their case, interviewing witnesses, documenting everything. Dr. Morris testified that Rosalind had received adequate care during her illness. Margaret testified to Elara's dedication as a teacher. Thomas and his father testified that Elara had worked hard to maintain the cottage and care for her daughter. But Darian's team had more. They brought in household staff from Ashmont House, who testified that the Duchess had always been distant, preoccupied with social obligations over her daughter. They brought in society ladies who claimed Elara had seemed unstable in the weeks before she left. They even brought in the merchant who'd sold her the poor-quality firewood, who testified that she'd been unable to afford the good stuff. The hearing was held in the provincial magistrate's office. Elara sat next to Anne, watching Darian across the room. He wouldn't meet her eyes. Seraphine wasn't there. She really had left. But his solicitor was sharp and ruthless. Mrs. Whitcomb abandoned her post, the solicitor argued, left her duties, her responsibilities, and dragged her daughter into poverty. The child nearly died of scarlet fever in that cottage. Would she have been ill at all if she'd stayed at Ashmont House with proper heating and nutrition? Anne countered, Mrs. Whitcomb left a marriage where she was neglected and invisible. She's rebuilt her life with dignity and provided her daughter with something Ashmont House never offered, a present parent. A present parent living in squalor. A parent who works every day to provide, who teaches, who cares, who is there. When did the Duke last spend meaningful time with his daughter? When did he last know what she was learning, what she feared, what she loved? The magistrate, an older man with tired eyes, listened to it all. At the end, he called for a recess to consider his decision. Elara and Anne waited in the hallway. Rosalind was with Margaret back in Millbrook, spared from witnessing this. Elara was grateful for that, at least. "What do you think?" Elara asked. "I think it could go either way," Anne said honestly. "You're a good mother, but he's a duke with resources. Sometimes that's all that matters." An hour later, they were called back in. The magistrate looked at both parties. This is a difficult case. On one hand, the Duke can provide material advantages, wealth, education, social position. On the other hand, Mrs. Whitcomb has demonstrated dedication and present parenting. Elara's heart was pounding so hard she could barely hear. However, the magistrate continued, the court must prioritize the child's welfare, and the evidence shows that Mrs. Whitcomb's current living situation is inadequate. The cottage is in disrepair. The child became seriously ill. While I commend Mrs. Whitcomb's efforts, I cannot ignore these facts. No. No, no, no. Therefore, I am awarding primary custody to the Duke of Ashmont. The words hit like a physical blow. Elara heard Anne start to object, heard Darian's solicitor speaking, but it all sounded distant, underwater. However, the magistrate said, and something in his tone made Elara focus. I am attaching conditions. Mrs. Whitcomb will have visitation rights every weekend and alternating holidays. Furthermore, the Duke must establish a trust fund for the child's independent use at age 18, separate from the estate. And, he paused, the Duke must attend family counseling sessions with both Mrs. Whitcomb and the child, monthly, mandatory. Darian's solicitor stood. Your Honor, the Duke has responsibilities. Then he should have considered those before seeking custody of a child he barely knows. The magistrate's voice was sharp. These are my terms. Accept them or withdraw the petition. Silence. Darian was staring at the magistrate like he'd grown a second head. His solicitor looked furious. Well, the magistrate demanded. Darian finally spoke. I accept. The magistrate nodded. Court adjourned. Mrs. Whitcomb, you have 2 weeks to arrange the transfer. Elara walked out of that office in a daze. She'd lost. Rosalind would go to Ashmont House. She'd become a weekend visitor in her daughter's life. Anne touched her arm. I'm sorry. We did everything we could. I know. The visitation rights are more than most mothers get in these situations, and the counseling requirement, that's unusual. The magistrate was trying to help. I know, Elara said again, but it didn't make it hurt less. She rode back to Millbrook in silence, found Rosalind at the cottage with Margaret, playing with her rabbit. Mama! Rosalind ran to her. How did it go? Elara knelt down, taking her daughter's hands. Sweetheart, there's been a change. You're going to go live with Papa for a while. Rosalind's face fell. I don't want to. I know, but it's what the court decided. You'll stay at Ashmont House during the week, and you'll come stay with me on weekends. But I want to stay here, with you. I want that too. But sometimes we don't get what we want. Sometimes we have to make the best of what we're given. Rosalind started crying. Elara held her, feeling her own tears fall. Margaret quietly left them alone. That night, Elara packed Rosalind's things. The few dresses she owned, her books, her beloved rabbit. It all fit in one small trunk. We'll make this work, Elara promised. I'll see you every weekend, and you'll tell me everything that happens during the week. Everything. Promise. Promise. Rosalind's voice was small. 2 days later, a carriage arrived from Ashmont House. Elara loaded the trunk, helped Rosalind inside, and watched her daughter ride away. The cottage felt impossibly empty. Elara stood in the doorway for a long time after the carriage disappeared, snow falling around her, wondering if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. If she should have stayed, should have accepted invisibility if it meant keeping her daughter. She was still standing there when another carriage arrived. Not from Ashmont House this time. From the village. Dr. Morris climbed out, looking grim. Mrs. Whitcomb, there's been an outbreak. 3 families with scarlet fever. I need help. I'm not a doctor. No. But you nursed your daughter through it. You know what to watch for, how to manage the fever. I'm one man, and there are already 15 children sick. He looked at her directly. I need help. The village needs help, even if they don't deserve it. Elara thought about saying no. Thought about closing the door and letting Millbrook deal with its own problems. They'd certainly let her deal with hers alone, but she couldn't, because that's not who she was. Give me 5 minutes to get my coat. She spent the next week moving between sick houses, helping Dr. Morris treat fever after fever. The work was exhausting, often heartbreaking. 2 children died despite their best efforts, but 13 survived, and those families remembered who'd helped save them. Word spread. The disgraced Duchess who'd lost custody of her daughter was now the woman who'd helped save their children. The narrative started to shift, slowly, grudgingly. Mrs. Pepper at the vegetable stall stopped overcharging her. The baker's wife started adding an extra roll to her orders. Small things. But they mattered. It was during the 4th week of the outbreak that everything changed. Elara was at the Henderson house, tending to their youngest, when someone burst through the door. Mrs. Whitcomb, it's your daughter. She's at Ashmont House. She's sick. The world stopped. What? Scarlet fever. Again. The Duke sent for Dr. Morris, but the roads are snowed in. He can't get there for at least a day. Elara was moving before she'd consciously decided to, grabbing her coat, her medical bag, the one Dr. Morris had given her after the 3rd house call. I need a horse. Now. Thomas materialized with one. I'll ride with you. They rode through a blizzard, snow so thick Elara could barely see. The journey that should have taken an hour took 3. By the time they reached Ashmont House, Elara's hands were numb and her face was raw from the cold. Mrs. Halloway met them at the door. Thank heavens! She's asking for you. The Duke is with her. Elara ran up the stairs, Thomas following. She burst into Rosalind's room, the bedroom she'd decorated 7 years ago when they'd first learned they were having a daughter. Rosalind was in bed, fever-flushed, breathing too fast. And sitting beside her, looking terrified and helpless, was Darian. He looked up when Elara entered. Their eyes met across the room, across everything that had happened between them. I don't know what to do, he said. His voice cracked on the words. I don't know how to help her. Elara moved to the bedside, already assessing the rash, the fever, the breathing pattern, similar to before but worse, moving faster. How long has she been like this? Since this morning. I sent for the doctor, but the snow... I know about the snow. Elara turned to Mrs. Halloway. I need cold water. clean cloths, and willow bark if you have it. Also honey and lemon for tea. Quickly. Mrs. Halloway ran. Elara turned to Darian. Help me sit her up. She needs to breathe easier. They worked together, propping Rosalind against pillows. The girl's eyes opened, unfocused. Mama? I'm here, baby. I'm right here. I'm scared. I know, but we're going to fight this. You and me. Like we did before. Remember? I'm tired of fighting. I know, but you're stronger than this. You're my daughter, and my daughter doesn't give up. Over the next 24 hours, Elara fought for Rosalind's life with everything she had. Darian stayed too, but he was useless, pacing, asking questions, getting in the way. Finally, Elara snapped. Either help or leave. I don't know how to help. Then learn. Hold this cloth. Keep it cool. Replace it every 10 minutes. Can you do that? He could. He did. And slowly, over the course of that endless night, something shifted. They weren't husband and wife. They were two terrified parents trying to save their daughter. The fever broke just before dawn. Rosalind's breathing eased. Color started returning to her cheeks. Elara slumped in her chair, exhausted. Across the bed, Darian looked equally wrecked. Thank you, he said quietly. She's my daughter. I know, I didn't know what to do. I've never known what to do. Elara looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in months. He looked older, tired, lost. You could start by being here, she said. Not managing, not organizing, just being present. I don't know how. Then learn that too. Rosalind stirred, her eyes opening. She looked at both her parents, confused. You're both here. We are, Elara said. Are you fighting? No, sweetheart, we're not fighting. Are you coming back, Mama, to the big house? Elara met Darian's eyes. He looked like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. No, Elara said gently. I'm not coming back, but I'm here now, and I'll always come when you need me. Even though Papa and you don't like each other? Even then. Rosalind seemed to accept this. She fell back asleep, peaceful now, the danger passing. Elara stood to leave. Darian followed her to the hallway. Elara, wait. She turned. He was standing there, this man she'd married, this stranger she'd lived with. I read it, he said. The journal. The one you left at the ball. I finally read it. She waited. I didn't know, he continued. His voice was raw. I didn't know you felt invisible. Didn't know I'd made you disappear. I don't know what I thought. That everything was fine. That you were fine. I wasn't fine, Darian. I was drowning, and you never noticed. I know that now. He ran a hand through his hair. I don't know how to fix this. Don't even know if it can be fixed. But watching her tonight, almost losing her, I realized something. You're the only one who knew what to do. Not because you're a duchess or because you're educated, but because you're her mother. Because you've been paying attention. Yes. I want to learn how to do that. Pay attention. Be present. Not for the estate or for appearances. For her. And maybe, he hesitated, maybe for us. Elara looked at him for a long moment, saw something in his face she hadn't seen in years. Vulnerability. Genuine emotion. The man she'd married before he disappeared behind the title. I don't know if there's an us anymore, she said honestly. Too much has happened. Too much hurt. I know. But for Rosalind's sake, we need to figure out how to be in the same room without making her feel like she has to choose sides. The magistrate ordered counseling sessions. Yes. Maybe we should actually try. Really try, not just go through the motions. It was the most honest thing he'd said to her in years. Maybe, Elara said, maybe we should. She left Ashmont House as dawn broke, riding back through the snow to her cottage in Millbrook. The building looked smaller than ever, more broken, but it was hers. She was changing into dry clothes when someone knocked. Anne Fletcher stood on her doorstep, snow in her hair. I heard about Rosalind. Is she all right? She will be. Anne studied her face. And you? Elara thought about it. About the custody decision and the outbreak and Rosalind's fever. About Darian's confession and the impossible road ahead. I don't know, she said. Ask me again tomorrow. Anne smiled slightly. That's fair. She paused. I also came to tell you something. The magistrate, the one who heard your case, he's asked to see you, says it's urgent. Why? He wouldn't say, but he seemed concerned. They rode to the magistrate's office together. The man was waiting, looking grave. Mrs. Whitcomb, thank you for coming. He pulled out a folder. I need to tell you something about your case, something that didn't come out during the hearing. What is it? The Duke's petition for custody. It wasn't just about the living conditions or the scarlet fever. He looked uncomfortable. He filed documents claiming you were mentally unstable, that you'd had episodes of erratic behavior. He had 3 physicians ready to testify to that effect. Elara's blood went cold. That's not true. I know. That's why I rejected those documents. Told his solicitor if he pursued that line of argument, I'd hold him in contempt. The magistrate leaned forward. But here's what concerns me. The Duke was willing to lie, to destroy you legally to get custody. And men who lie once will lie again. What are you saying? I'm saying be careful. The custody arrangement I ordered, it's enforceable, but only if both parties follow the rules. If he decides to violate it, you'll need evidence, documentation, proof. He slid a second folder across the desk. This is everything from the case, as every testimony, every document. Keep it safe. You might need it. Elara took the folder with numb hands. Thank you. Mrs. Whitcomb, you're not the first woman I've seen in this situation, and the pattern is always the same. First, they try to control you. When that fails, they try to break you. When that fails, they try to erase you. His expression was serious. Don't let him erase you. She rode back to Millbrook in silence, the folder heavy in her bag. Inside the cottage, she opened it and began reading through the documents. And that's when she found it. Buried in the financial disclosures, in the tiny print of legal language, was a name she recognized. A business partnership between Darian and someone called Jay Blackwood, Seraphine's brother. The dates were damning. The partnership had started 3 years ago. 3 years of financial entanglement, of shared business interests, of profits flowing both ways. Seraphine hadn't been just a mistress or even just a business associate. She'd been part of a calculated financial alliance. And Elara, managing the household, maintaining the social connections, had been an essential part of making that alliance work. That's why Darian had kept her around even as he'd stopped seeing her. She'd been useful, a tool. Elara sat back, the document trembling in her hands. She'd thought she'd understood what had happened to her marriage, thought she'd figured it out. But this was deeper, more calculated, more cruel. The question was, what did she do about it? The answer came 3 days later when a carriage pulled up to the cottage. Not Darian this time, not a messenger, Seraphine Blackwood herself. She stepped out, still beautiful, still confident. But there was something different in her expression, something almost apologetic. Mrs. Whitcomb, may I come in? Every instinct said no, but curiosity won. Why are you here? Because I owe you the truth, Seraphine said, and because my brother just died. Elara stepped aside. Seraphine entered the cottage, looking around with barely concealed surprise at the modest surroundings. Sit, Elara said. Talk, and this better be worth my time. Seraphine sat. For the first time since Elara had known her, she looked uncertain. My brother and the Duke were partners. You knew that. I just found out. The partnership was supposed to make us both wealthy, and it did for a while. But Jonathan, my brother, he was embezzling. From the business, from the Duke, from everyone. By the time I found out, he'd stolen nearly $500,000. Elara's breath caught. $500,000? The Duke doesn't know yet. Jonathan died before anyone could discover the full extent. But when they audit the books, and they will, it's all going to come out. Seraphine met her eyes. And when it does, the Duke will be ruined. Everything you built, everything you saved, it's gone. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know. Because I was part of it, even if I didn't know what Jonathan was doing. And because, she hesitated. Because you're the only one smart enough to maybe stop it. Elara stared at her. You want me to save him? After everything? No, I want you to save yourself and your daughter. Because when this comes out, it won't just destroy him. It'll destroy the entire Whitcomb estate, Rosalind's inheritance, her future, everything. Down. Seraphine stood. I'm leaving the country. Tonight. Before the scandal breaks. But I thought you should know. You have maybe 2 weeks before the auditors find it. 2 weeks to decide what you want to do. She left. Elara sat in the empty cottage, staring at nothing. 2 weeks. 2 weeks to save an estate she'd walked away from. Save a man who'd tried to destroy her. Save a future for a daughter who barely got to live at Ashmont House. Or she could let it all burn. It would be so easy. To just let the consequences fall where they would. Let Darian face what his poor judgment and worse partnerships had created. But Rosalind. Always it came back to Rosalind. Elara pulled out paper and began making lists. Numbers, names, assets, debts. The same kind of analysis she'd done 7 years ago when she'd saved the estate the first time. If she was going to do this, and she hated that she was even considering it, she needed to understand exactly how bad it was. 3 days of digging revealed that it was worse than Seraphine had said. Jonathan Blackwood had stolen nearly $700,000, not $500,000, and he'd done it cleverly, hiding the theft across multiple accounts and partnerships. When the auditors found it, the scandal would be catastrophic. The Whitcomb name would be mud. Every business dealing would be scrutinized. Darian could face legal consequences, and Rosalind would grow up as the daughter of a disgraced duke. Elara sat in her cottage, surrounded by papers, and made a decision. She packed a bag and rode to Ashmont House. Found Darian in his study, working late as always. He looked up when she entered, surprised. Elara? Is something wrong? Is Rosalind? Rosalind's fine, but you're not. She dropped the folder on his desk. Read that. Then we need to talk. He read through those documents, his face growing paler with each page. When he finished, he looked up at her with something close to despair. This will ruin everything. I know. I didn't know about the embezzlement. I trusted him. I know that too. Elara sat across from him. But here's the question. Do you want to save it? Can it even be saved? Maybe. If we move fast. If we're smart. If we work together. She paused. Like we should have been doing all along. Darian studied her face. Why would you help me? After everything. I'm not helping you. I'm helping Rosalind. And maybe, she hesitated. Maybe I'm helping the person I used to be. The one who was good at fixing impossible situations. What do you need? Access to everything. Full financial records, all partnership agreements, every contract. And I need you to trust me completely. No questions, no second guessing. Can you do that? He looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood and retrieved a key from his desk drawer. This opens the safe in the library. Everything you need is there. It's yours. It was the most trust he'd shown her in 7 years. Elara took the key. One more thing. When this is over, when the estate is saved, if I can save it, I want the custody arrangement modified. Equal custody. Rosalind splits time between both households. Done. And I want the cottage deeded to me, legally, so it can never be taken away. Done. And monthly counseling. For real this time. All 3 of us working on being a family, even if we're not living as one. Yes, all of it. Whatever you want. Elara stood. Then let's get to work. We have 2 weeks to pull off a miracle. They worked through the night and the nights that followed. Elara pored over records, tracked stolen money, identified which assets could be quickly sold to cover the losses. Darian handled the legal side, contacting solicitors, negotiating with creditors. It was brutal work. But somewhere in those long nights, something shifted. They started talking. Not about the estate or the finances, but about other things, small things. He asked about her teaching. She asked about his work. Actually asked, actually listened. And slowly, grudgingly, they started to remember why they'd liked each other once upon a time. It wasn't romance. It wasn't even friendship. But it was something. A foundation, maybe. Something to build on. On the 13th day, Elara found the solution. A way to restructure the debt, liquidate certain holdings, and cover most of the embezzlement without destroying the estate entirely. It would hurt. Ashmont House would be significantly smaller, their social standing diminished, but they'd survive. She presented it to Darian at dawn. He read through her proposal twice. "This works," he said, sounding almost shocked. "I know." "You saved it. Again." "We saved it. I couldn't have done it without your legal contacts." He looked at her. "You could have let it burn, could have walked away and let everything collapse." "Yes." "Why didn't you?" "Because Rosalind deserves better than to be the daughter of a scandal, and because—" She hesitated. "Because somewhere under all the hurt and anger, I still remember the man who said, 'I hope we can make something good of this.' Maybe we can't make a marriage, but we can make a partnership, for her sake." Darian nodded slowly. For her sake. The auditors came on day 15. By then, Elara and Darian had restructured everything. The embezzlement was disclosed, but so was the recovery plan. The scandal still broke. There was no avoiding that, but it was manageable. Contained. The Whitcomb estate survived. Diminished, but intact. Rosalind, thankfully, was young enough that most of it went over her head. She knew something had happened, knew her parents had been working together, but the details remained blessedly vague. 2 months later, Elara sat in the cottage, her cottage, legally deeded to her name, and reviewed the new custody arrangement. Equal time. Equal say. A real partnership in raising their daughter. It wasn't the ending she'd imagined when she walked out of that ballroom 6 months ago, but it was an ending she could live with. There was a knock at the door. Darian stood there, snow on his shoulders, an envelope in his hand. "What's this?" she asked. "Read it." She opened the envelope. Inside was a legal document transferring 1/3 of the Ashmont estate holdings into her name. Not as his wife, as an individual owner. "Darian, I can't—" "Yes, you can. You saved it. Twice. It should have always been partly yours." He paused. "I'm trying, Elara, to see you, to really see you. I know it's late. I know I've already lost you, but I want you to know I'm trying." She looked at the document, then at him. "This doesn't fix everything. I know. We're still separate, still living apart. I know that too. But it's a start." "Is it?" "Maybe." She folded the document carefully. "Ask me again in a year, after the counseling, after we figure out if we can be in the same room without hurting each other." He nodded. A year, then. After he left, Elara stood in her cottage, her warm, dry, repaired cottage, and looked out at the snow. Somewhere in Ashmont House, Rosalind was probably reading before bed. Next weekend, she'd be here, in this cottage, helping Elara bake bread and telling stories about her week. It wasn't the life Elara had planned, but it was hers, hard-won and honest and real. And that, finally, was enough. For now. For now. Spring came late that year, hesitant and cold, like it wasn't sure it was welcome. Elara stood in the cottage garden, turning over soil that was still half frozen, wondering if anything she planted would actually grow. "You're doing it wrong." She looked up. Thomas stood at the fence, his younger brother beside him. Both had grown taller over the winter, Thomas especially, shooting up like a weed, his voice finally settling into something deeper. "I'm doing it exactly how the book says to do it," Elara replied, holding up the gardening manual she'd borrowed from Margaret. "Book's wrong, or at least it's wrong for this soil. Ground here's too rocky. You need to build raised beds, mix in better dirt." He gestured to the pile of stones she'd been cursing all morning. "Those rocks? Don't throw them away. Use them to line the beds. Keeps the rabbits out." Elara looked at the rocks, then at Thomas. "You're going to make me feel incompetent, aren't you?" "No, ma'am, just trying to help. My pa says you've been asking around about farming techniques. Figured I'd save you some trouble." He opened the gate without waiting for permission. "Come on, I'll show you." Over the next hour, Thomas transformed her chaotic garden plot into something that actually looked functional. His brother, Daniel, age 10, provided running commentary and occasional actual help. You planning on feeding just yourself or selling some? Thomas asked, wiping dirt from his hands. I hadn't thought that far ahead. I was just hoping to grow enough that I didn't have to buy everything at market prices. Thomas snorted. Mrs. Pepper still overcharging you? Not as much as before? But yes. Figures. Well, if you get a decent crop, you could sell the extra. People in the village would buy from you now. Things have changed some. Elara caught the careful phrasing. Changed how? Daniel piped up before Thomas could stop him. People stopped saying mean things about you after you helped with the fever. My ma says you're tougher than you look. Daniel, Thomas warned. What? It's true. She said the Duchess might be strange, but she's not useless. The boy paused. That's a compliment. Ma doesn't give those out much. Elara found herself smiling despite everything. Tell your mother I said thank you, I think. After they left, she looked at the newly organized garden beds and felt something unexpected. Hope. Not the desperate kind from 6 months ago, but something quieter, steadier. She was still considering this when another visitor arrived. Anne Fletcher, looking harried and carrying a stack of papers. I need your help, Anne said without preamble. With what? A case. Woman named Clara Thompson, married to a merchant. He's been beating her for 3 years. She finally left, took their 2 sons. Now he's filed for custody, claiming she's an unfit mother. Anne's expression was grim. Sound familiar? It did. Uncomfortably so. I'm not a solicitor, Anne. I don't need you to be a solicitor. I need you to testify. Tell them what it's like, leaving everything, starting over with nothing, fighting for your children in a system designed to favor men with money and power. Anne leaned forward. You won, Elara. Not completely, but you got shared custody. That's more than most women in your position ever see. Clara needs to know it's possible, and the magistrate needs to hear from someone who's lived it. Elara thought about saying no, about keeping her head down, protecting the fragile peace she'd built. But then she thought about that first night in the cottage, Rosalind asking if they were poor, both of them terrified and uncertain. When's the hearing? Next week, Thursday. I'll be there. Anne squeezed her shoulder. Thank you. You have no idea what this means. I think I do. The hearing was smaller than Elara's had been, held in the same magistrate's office with the same tired-eyed official presiding. Clara Thompson sat next to Anne, looking like she might shatter at any moment. She was younger than Elara, maybe 25, with bruises on her wrists that her sleeves didn't quite cover. Her husband sat across the room, looking prosperous and respectable. His solicitor was smooth, polished, and absolutely ruthless. Mrs. Thompson abandoned her marital home without warning, taking the children in the night like a thief. She's currently living in a rented room above a tavern, hardly a suitable environment for young boys. Furthermore, she has no income, no means of support. My client, meanwhile, can provide stability, education, a proper home. Your client also broke her arm last summer. Anne interrupted. We have the physician's report. He claims she fell down the stairs. Accidents happen. 3 times? She's fallen down the stairs 3 times in as many years? The solicitor's expression didn't change. Women can be clumsy, and men can be violent, Anne snapped. We have testimony from neighbors who heard the arguments, saw the bruises. This isn't about providing stability. This is about control. The magistrate held up a hand. I'll hear from the witnesses. Mrs. Fletcher, call your first. I call Elara Whitcomb. The husband's solicitor looked up sharply. The Duchess of Ashmont? What relevance could she possibly— Mrs. Whitcomb, Anne corrected. And her relevance is that she left a marriage and fought for custody of her child under similar circumstances. Her testimony speaks to the challenges women face in these situations. Elara took the stand, feeling exposed under the scrutiny. Claire's husband was staring at her with undisguised contempt. His solicitor looked calculating. Anne began gently. Mrs. Whitcomb, can you describe your living situation when you first left Ashmont House? I moved to a cottage in Millbrook. It was in disrepair, leaking roof, barely functional. I had limited funds and no immediate source of income. And your daughter? She came with me. We lived simply, very simply. Did you face challenges in caring for her? Yes. Financial pressure, social isolation, and when she became ill with scarlet fever, I nearly lost her. Elara's voice steadied. But I didn't lose her. Because despite the poverty and the hardship, I was there. I knew what she needed. I could care for her. And the custody hearing? The Duke claimed you were an unfit mother due to these circumstances. He did. The magistrate awarded shared custody with conditions. Anne turned to the magistrate. Mrs. Whitcomb left a powerful man who neglected her. She built a new life from nothing. She proved that a mother's presence and dedication matter more than material wealth. Mrs. Thompson deserves the same chance. The husband's solicitor stood. May I cross-examine? The magistrate nodded. The solicitor approached with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mrs. Whitcomb, you mentioned financial hardship. Didn't your poverty directly contribute to your daughter's illness? Scarlet fever doesn't discriminate based on wealth. Children in wealthy homes die from it too. But surely better nutrition, warmer housing. My daughter received excellent care. She survived. That's what matters. You mentioned social isolation. Isn't it true that you were ostracized by society? That people viewed you as unstable? Elara kept her voice level. People viewed me as unconventional. I left a marriage that wasn't working. That made some people uncomfortable. Uncomfortable? Or concerned for your judgment? He pulled out a document. I have here a letter from Lady Pembroke stating that your behavior at the Castellan ball was shocking and erratic. That you created a public scandal. I made a private decision public. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, your actions destroyed your social standing, impoverished your daughter, and forced the Duke to seek custody to protect her welfare. He leaned forward. Are those really the actions we should be holding up as an example for Mrs. Thompson? The room went quiet. Elara felt the weight of the question, the trap embedded in it. If she defended her choices, she'd look arrogant. If she expressed regret, she'd undermine Clara's case. She chose a third option, truth. My actions weren't perfect, she said. I made mistakes. I left with less planning than I should have. I underestimated how hard it would be. But I don't regret it, because staying in that house was killing me. Slowly, quietly, but killing me nonetheless. And my daughter was learning that invisibility was normal, that neglect was acceptable, that a woman's voice didn't matter. She looked directly at Clara. I chose to teach her something different, that we deserve to be seen, to be heard, to matter, even if it's hard, especially if it's hard. The solicitor tried to regroup. Very touching. But the fact remains, Elara interrupted, that I fought for my daughter and won. Not completely, but enough. And Mrs. Thompson deserves the same chance to prove that love and presence matter more than money, to show her sons that leaving abuse isn't shameful, it's survival. She stepped down. Clara was crying silently. Anne looked grimly satisfied. The magistrate called for a recess. Elara waited in the hallway with Anne and Clara. Thank you, Clara whispered. I couldn't have said those things. I don't have your education, your standing. You have your truth, Elara said. That's enough. When they were called back in, the magistrate looked even more tired than before. This court finds that while Mr. Thompson can provide material advantages, the evidence of domestic violence is concerning. Mrs. Thompson has demonstrated a commitment to her children's welfare by removing them from a dangerous environment. He paused. I'm awarding primary custody to Mrs. Thompson with supervised visitation for the father pending completion of a rehabilitation program. Clara gasped. Her husband's face went purple with rage. His solicitor was already filing objections, but the magistrate banged his gavel. Court adjourned. Outside, Clara grabbed Elara's hands. You did this. You helped save us. Anne did this. I just told the truth. No, Anne said. We both did this, together. Riding back to Millbrook, Elara felt something shift. She'd spent 6 months focused on survival, her own, Rosalind's. But maybe there was more to this new life than just surviving. Maybe there was purpose. The next day, 3 more women showed up at Anne's office. All of them had heard about Clara's case. All of them wanted help. Anne looked overwhelmed. I can't handle this alone. Then don't, Elara said. Teach me. Not to be a solicitor. I know that takes years. But to help, to assist, to understand the law well enough to support you. You want to work with me? I want to do something that matters. Teaching matters, yes, but this? Elara gestured to the women waiting outside. This could change lives. Anne studied her. It won't pay well. Most of these women have nothing. I'm used to nothing now. And it won't make you popular. People don't like women who help other women leave. I stopped caring about popularity 6 months ago. Anne smiled. All right then, welcome to the practice. We'll start with basic legal research. You read fast? Very. Over the next month, Elara split her time between teaching at the school and working with Anne. She learned the intricacies of property law, custody statutes, and contract disputes. She interviewed women, documented abuse, gathered evidence. It was exhausting. It was also the first time in years she felt like her education, her intelligence, her skills were being fully used. Rosalind noticed the change. On one of their weekends together, she asked, Mama, are you happy? They were baking bread. Elara had finally mastered it after burning 17 loaves. Rosalind was kneading dough with the focused intensity she brought to everything. I think so, Elara said honestly. Why do you ask? You seem different, lighter, like you're not carrying something heavy anymore. That's very perceptive, sweetheart. I'm smart. You tell me that all the time. Rosalind paused. Are you and Papa going to get back together? Elara's hand stilled. I don't know. Do you want us to? I don't know either. Rosalind shaped her dough carefully. I like having 2 houses. Ashmont is nice, but it's big and quiet. Here is small, but feels more alive. And Papa is different now. He asks me things. Real questions. Not just, how was your day? What kind of questions? Like what I'm reading, or if I'm still afraid of thunderstorms, or what I want to be when I grow up. Rosalind looked up. He's trying. It's weird, but I think I like it. I'm glad. But I don't want you to go back just because of me. The counseling lady says I'm not responsible for your happiness. Elara pulled her daughter close, getting flour all over both of them. The counseling lady is right, and wise. You're not responsible for anyone's happiness but your own. Then whose happiness are you responsible for? Mine. And right now I'm happy doing work that matters. Teaching children, helping women, building a life I chose. She smiled. That's enough. The counseling sessions were awkward at first. Dr. Helena Marsh ran them with brisk efficiency, tolerating no deflection or avoidance. This isn't couples counseling, she announced at the first session. This is family counseling. Our goal isn't to save a marriage. It's to create a functional co-parenting relationship that doesn't damage the child. Darian looked relieved. Elara felt oddly disappointed, though she wasn't sure why. The sessions forced difficult conversations about expectations and failures, about invisibility and neglect, about the ways they'd both contributed to the collapse. Him through absence, her through silent endurance. You never told me you were unhappy, Darian said during the 3rd session. I did. Multiple times. You weren't listening. I would have remembered, would you? Dr. Marsh interrupted. Let's test that. Elara, tell me 3 times you explicitly told your husband you were unhappy. Elara thought back. Our 4th anniversary. I said I felt like we were living separate lives. He said I was being dramatic. Darian shifted uncomfortably. A year later, after Rosalind's 3rd birthday, I asked if we could spend more time together as a family. He said work was demanding and I should understand that. I don't remember that. Exactly my point, Elara said. And the week before I left, I stood in the hallway and said, Darian, I'm drowning. You walked past me to your study, didn't even pause. The room went quiet. Dr. Marsh made a note. Darian, what do you say to that? He looked genuinely stricken. I don't remember. How can I not remember her saying she was drowning? Because you weren't paying attention, Dr. Marsh said bluntly. You'd already decided what the narrative was. Stable marriage, capable wife, successful duke, anything that contradicted that narrative got filtered out. That's not fair. It's accurate, which is different from fair. Dr. Marsh turned to Elara. Now you, tell me why you didn't leave sooner. I thought I could fix it. I thought if I just tried harder, managed better, became more useful. Stop. Listen to what you just said. You thought if you became more useful, he'd see you. But you're not a tool, Elara. You're a person. Why did you need him to see you? Why wasn't it enough that you saw yourself? The question hit hard. I don't know. Think about it. Because until you figure that out, you'll always be vulnerable to disappearing, whether it's in a marriage, a career, or anything else. These sessions left Elara exhausted and raw, but they also forced both her and Darian to confront truths they'd been avoiding. By the 5th session, they were actually talking, not performing for the counselor, but genuinely communicating. I read your journals, Darian said quietly. All of them. The ones you wrote during our marriage. Elara stiffened. I didn't give you permission. I know. And I apologize. But I needed to understand, and his voice cracked slightly. They destroyed me, seeing myself through your eyes, seeing what I'd become, how I'd treated you. And I'm sorry for all of it, for not seeing you, for taking you for granted, for thinking my work was more important than our family. He met her eyes. I'm sorry it took losing you to wake up. It wasn't enough to fix everything, but it was something. Spring turned to summer. Elara's garden actually produced vegetables. Not many, but enough to supplement her meals and sell a little at the market. Her work with Anne expanded. They'd helped 6 women leave abusive situations, secured custody for 4 of them. The village's opinion of Elara continued to shift. She'd never be fully accepted. She'd broken too many unspoken rules for that, but she'd earned a grudging respect. People nodded when she passed. Some even smiled. Mrs. Pepper at the vegetable stall started charging her normal prices. The baker's wife invited her to join the women's auxiliary. Thomas and Daniel became regular visitors, helping with repairs and teaching her practical skills the Duchess and her had never learned. And Rosalind thrived. She spent weekdays at Ashmont House with its tutors and structure, weekends at the cottage with its chaos and freedom. She was learning both worlds, choosing what she wanted from each. One Saturday in late July, Darian came to the cottage, not for a scheduled exchange or a counseling session, just to talk. They sat in the garden, Elara's properly functioning garden, drinking tea that no longer tasted like boiled dirt. The estate is stable, he said. The Blackwood scandal has blown over mostly. We've recovered about 60% of what was stolen. That's good. It's because of you, your restructuring plan, your negotiations. Everyone knows it. The other lords, the business partners, they all know the Duchess of Ashmont saved the estate. Former Duchess. Legally, you're still the Duchess. We never divorced. Elara hadn't thought about that in months. Do you want to? Do you? She considered it. I don't know. I'm not interested in reconciliation. Not in the traditional sense, but divorce would mean losing access to Rosalind during the week. The custody arrangement assumes we're married. We could modify it. We could, should we? Darian was quiet for a long moment. I don't know what I want anymore. 6 months ago, I wanted you back. Wanted everything to go back to normal. But now I realize normal was broken. I don't want that back. Then what do you want? I want to know my daughter, really know her. I want to be a father who's actually present. He paused. And I want to know you, not as my wife maybe, but as something, a partner in raising Rosalind, a friend, if that's possible after everything. I think friendship might take time. I have time. For the first time in years, I'm not in a rush. He smiled slightly. I've been attending your sessions with Anne. Did you know that? Elara blinked. What? Not as a participant, just sitting in the back, watching, seeing how you help these women, how you fight for them. His expression was complicated. You're brilliant, Elara. I always knew you were intelligent, but I never saw the full extent, never gave you the opportunity to show it. Watching you now, seeing what you're capable of when you're not just managing a household, it's humbling. Are you saying this to win me back? No, I'm saying it because it's true, and because I want you to know that I see you now, finally. Maybe too late for us, but not too late for me to acknowledge what I should have seen all along. It was the most honest conversation they'd had in years, maybe ever. I don't know what we are anymore, Elara said. Not married, not divorced, not enemies, not exactly friends. Can we be something new, something we define ourselves? Maybe. She refilled his tea. But it has to be built on honesty. No more pretending everything's fine when it's not. No more invisible work. Agreed. And I keep my independence, my work with Anne, my cottage, my life. I wouldn't ask you to give that up. I've seen what happens when you do. They sat in comfortable silence, watching bees work through Elara's flowers. It wasn't romance. It wasn't even the beginning of reconciliation. But it was peace. And after 7 years of quiet warfare, peace felt revolutionary. The breakthrough came in August. Lord Vernon, the same man who'd tried to convince Elara to return to Ashmont House during Rosalind's fever, requested a meeting. Not with Darian, with her. They met at a tea house in the capital. Vernon looked older than Elara remembered, grayer. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," he said. "I wasn't sure you would. I'm curious why you wanted to. I need your help, professional help." He pulled out documents. "My daughter, she's in a situation similar to the one you left. Married young to a man I thought was respectable. He's not. He's cruel. She wants to leave, but she's terrified of losing her children." Elara took the documents, scanning them. The details were familiar: isolation, control, escalating verbal abuse. "Why not hire a solicitor directly?" "I have 3 of them. They all say the same thing. The husband has rights, she has few options. Then I heard about your work with Anne Fletcher, how you've been winning these cases, getting women their children back." He met her eyes. "I need you to help my daughter the way you helped yourself." It was validation of a sort Elara hadn't expected. A lord, someone from her old world, coming to her for expertise. "I'll need to speak with her directly, and Anne will handle the legal aspects. I'm not a solicitor." "You're something better. You're someone who understands." Vernon's voice was rough. "I should have supported you when you left Darian. Instead, I judged you, called you unstable. I was wrong." "Yes, you were. Will you help my daughter anyway?" Elara thought about saying no, about making him feel the rejection she'd felt, but that would only hurt his daughter, who deserved better. "Yes. Have her contact Anne's office. We'll help." Word spread after that. More women came, more cases. Anne hired a second assistant, a young law student who worked for almost nothing because she believed in the cause. Elara found herself spending more time at the office than at the school. Margaret understood. "You found your calling," Margaret said. "Teaching is valuable, but this is changing the system. Don't give that up." "I don't want to abandon the children." "You're not. You're showing them what it looks like when a woman fights, when she builds something meaningful. That's a lesson too." Elara reduced her teaching to 3 days a week. The rest she spent on legal work. She was good at it, better than she'd expected. Her years managing the estate had taught her to see patterns, to navigate complex systems, to find solutions others missed. By autumn, they'd won 12 cases, lost 3. The wins were celebrated. The losses haunted Elara, knowing there were women who'd gone back to dangerous situations because the law favored their husbands. "You can't save everyone," Anne reminded her after a particularly brutal loss. "We do what we can. We fight for every inch, but the system is still broken. Then we change the system. Easier said than done. Maybe, but we start somewhere." That somewhere turned out to be a petition. Elara drafted it with Anne's help, a formal request to the Provincial Council to reform custody laws, to make domestic violence a legitimate factor in custody decisions, to require evidence of parenting involvement, not just financial capability. They gathered signatures, hundreds of them. Women, mostly, but some men too. Fathers who'd been excluded from their children's lives. Grandparents who'd watched daughters and granddaughters suffer. The petition was revolutionary. It was also probably doomed. "They'll never pass it," Anne said. "Too radical, too threatening to the existing power structure." "Maybe, but we make them say no. We make them explain why a father's wealth matters more than a mother's presence. We make the system defend itself. In October, they presented the petition to the provincial council. Elara stood before a panel of older men in expensive suits and delivered a speech that drew on every lesson she'd learned in 7 years of managing aristocratic egos. She was calm, rational, compelling. She cited statistics, legal precedents, and real cases. She didn't appeal to emotion. She knew these men would dismiss that. Instead, she appealed to their sense of justice, their pride in a fair system, their desire to be seen as progressive. Gentlemen, I'm not asking you to favor mothers over fathers. I'm asking you to favor presence over absence, evidence over assumption, reality over tradition. That's not radical, that's just honest. The council listened, didn't commit, said they'd consider it. It was less than Elara hoped for, but more than she'd expected. Walking out of that building, Anne bumped her shoulder. You were brilliant in there. We'll see if it matters. It will. Maybe not this year or next, but you just stood in front of the provincial council and demanded change. The disgraced duchess who was supposed to disappear quietly. That matters. That evening, Elara returned to the cottage to find Darian and Rosalind waiting. They'd made dinner, badly, judging by the smoke and mess in the kitchen, but they'd tried. We heard about the petition, Darian said. Rosalind wanted to celebrate. We made stew, Rosalind announced. It's kind of burnt, but Papa says that adds flavor. Papa is lying to make himself feel better, Darian admitted. But we tried. That counts for something, right? Elara looked at them, her daughter and her not-quite ex-husband, covered in flour and looking ridiculously proud of their inedible stew. And she laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. It counts, you, she said. Let's eat it anyway. The stew was terrible. They ate it anyway, making jokes and telling stories. Rosalind talked about her week at school, both schools, the formal one at Ashmont House and the rough and tumble one in Millbrook. Darian talked about estate business, but actually made it interesting, turning dry financial reports into stories. And Elara talked about the petition, the cases, the slow grinding work of changing minds. It felt for the first time in 7 years like a family. Not the traditional kind, but something new, something chosen. After Rosalind went to bed, Darian lingered. I've been thinking, he said, about the estate, about legacy, what we're building for Rosalind. And I want to establish a foundation for women leaving difficult situations, legal aid, temporary housing, job training, funded by estate profits. He paused. I'd want you to run it, officially, with full authority and a proper salary. Elara stared at him. You're serious? Completely. You're already doing this work. You should have real resources, real support. And Rosalind should see her mother building something that lasts, something that matters. This isn't about winning me back. No, this is about doing what's right and recognizing that the estate has resources that could change lives. Your expertise can direct those resources effectively. He smiled slightly. Also, it's selfish. If the foundation bears the Whitcomb name and does good work, it helps restore our reputation after the Blackwood scandal. At least you're honest about it. I'm learning, slowly. Elara considered it. A real foundation, legal resources, housing, training programs. Everything she and Anne had been cobbling together on a shoestring budget, but properly funded. I'd want full control. No interference from the estate board or family politics. Done. And Anne is legal director. She's earned that. Agreed. And the cottage stays mine, even if I'm working for the foundation. My space. My independence. I wouldn't have it any other way. Elara extended her hand. Then we have a deal, Your Grace. He shook it, his grip firm. We have a deal, Mrs. Whitcomb. 2 months later, the Whitcomb Foundation for Women's Welfare opened its doors. A small office in the capital, staffed by Anne, Elara, 2 assistants, and a rotating group of volunteers. The announcement made the society pages, not as scandal this time, but as genuine news. Duchess returns to public life with charitable foundation read one headline. Whitcomb Estate commits resources to helping vulnerable women read another. Not everyone was pleased. Some society ladies called it unbecoming for a duchess to involve herself in such matters. Some men grumbled about encouraging women to leave their marriages, but others, more than Elara expected, sent letters of support, donations, offers to volunteer. The foundation's first official case was a woman named Elizabeth Morris, merchant's wife, 3 children, husband who drank and became violent. She'd come to their office with a black eye and a desperate question. "Can you really help me?" Elara looked at her across the desk, this frightened woman who reminded her so much of herself 6 months ago, and said with absolute certainty, "Yes, we can." They did. It took 3 months, a brutal custody hearing, and resources Elara wouldn't have had without the foundation. But Elizabeth Morris left with her children, a small settlement, and a job lined up through the foundation's employment program. When it was over, Elizabeth hugged Elara fiercely. "You saved us." "No," Elara said. "You saved yourself. We just gave you the tools." It was the first real victory. There would be more. That winter, as snow fell on Millbrook and the cottage stayed warm thanks to Thomas's woodpile and proper repairs, Elara sat by the fire and took stock. A year ago, she'd been invisible, a ghost in a grand house, a duchess who'd slowly disappeared until even she couldn't remember who she was. Now she was visible, undeniably, uncomfortably visible, running a foundation, fighting legal battles, raising a daughter across 2 households, building something that mattered. It wasn't the life she'd planned. It was messy and complicated and still financially precarious, despite the foundation salary. Her cottage was still small. Her dresses were still out of fashion. She still worked harder than anyone from her social class was supposed to work. But it was hers, every inch of it, hard-won and honest and real. Rosalind appeared in the doorway, rabbit in hand. "Mama, can we make cookies? It's almost bedtime. Please? Papa never lets me bake at night." Elara smiled. "That's because Papa is sensible. Unlike me, get the flour." They baked cookies at 9 o'clock at night, getting dough everywhere, laughing when the first batch burned. Outside, snow fell. Inside, the cottage smelled like sugar and butter and home. And Elara realized something profound. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. Fully, messily, imperfectly living. The ghost had become solid. The invisible woman had found her voice, and the disgraced duchess had built an empire of her own, not of wealth or title, but of purpose. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. It was everything. Until the provincial council actually voted on the petition. The news came on a Tuesday morning in March, delivered by a messenger who looked apologetic before he even spoke. Elara was at the foundation office, reviewing case files with Anne when the man arrived. "Mrs. Whitcomb, I have word from the council." Elara took the envelope with steady hands, though her heart was racing. Anne stood beside her, reading over her shoulder. The language was formal, bureaucratic, designed to soften the blow, but the meaning was clear. Petition denied. No changes to custody law. The system would remain exactly as it was. "Damn," Anne said quietly. Elara read it twice, feeling something hard settle in her chest. Not surprised, she'd known this was likely, but disappointment still hurt. "They didn't even give reasons," she said. "Just insufficient grounds for reform at this time. Means they couldn't defend their position, so they're hiding behind procedure." Anne's expression was grim. "This is my fault. I should have prepared you for—" "No." Elara set down the letter. "We knew this might happen. We did it anyway. That matters." "Does it? If nothing changes—" "Something already changed. We made them look at the issue. We got hundreds of signatures. We made noise." Elara straightened her shoulders. "And we're not done. The council won't change the law. We change how it's applied. We win case by case. We document everything. We build evidence until they can't ignore it anymore." Anne studied her. "You've gotten stubborn. I've gotten tired of accepting no for an answer." That afternoon, Elara attended Rosalind's school performance at Ashmont House. Her daughter was playing a tree in some elaborate production about the changing seasons. She had exactly 3 lines and was taking the role very seriously. Darian sat beside Elara in the audience, both of them watching Rosalind deliver her wooden performance with the intensity of a Shakespearean actor. She's really committed to being that tree, Darian whispered. She's our daughter. Of course she's committed. When the performance ended, they waited backstage. Rosalind emerged, still in her tree costume, a brown dress with branches sewn onto the sleeves, looking simultaneously proud and embarrassed. You were wonderful, Elara said, pulling her close. I forgot my second line, did you notice? Not even a little bit. Liar. But Rosalind was smiling. Darian knelt down to her level. Your mother and I were wondering if you'd like to have dinner. All three of us. Not because of counseling or schedules, just because. Rosalind looked between them. Like a family? Like a family, Darian confirmed. Will it be weird? Probably, Elara admitted, but maybe good weird? They went to a small restaurant in the capital, nothing fancy, just a place with good food and privacy. Rosalind ordered everything wrong, mixing courses and creating combinations that made the waiter wince. Darian told stories about a state business that he somehow made funny. Elara talked about the foundation, carefully editing out the more disturbing details. It was almost normal, almost comfortable. And that terrified Elara more than she wanted to admit. Can we do this again, Rosalind asked over dessert. The three of us? Elara and Darian exchanged glances. Yes, Darian said, if your mother agrees. I agree, Elara heard herself say, but no promises about it being regular. We're all busy. I'll take irregular family dinners over no family dinners, Rosalind said pragmatically. Then, with devastating 8-year-old directness, are you two going to get married again? Actually married, not just technically married? Elara nearly choked on her wine. Darian looked like he'd been hit with a brick. That's a complicated question, Elara managed. Seems simple to me. Do you love each other or not? Out of the mouths of children. Elara looked at Darian, really looked at him. The man who'd failed her for 7 years, who'd learned to see her, who was trying, genuinely trying, to be better. Did she love him? I love who you're becoming, she said carefully. I don't know if I love who you were. Darian absorbed this. That's fair. I don't much like who I was either. But you're friends now? Rosalind pressed. We're something, Elara said. We're figuring it out as we go. Good enough, Rosalind declared and went back to her dessert. Later, walking back to the carriage, Darian touched Elara's arm. I meant what I said in there, about loving who I'm becoming. I'm trying to be someone worth loving. For Rosalind. And for you, if you'll let me. Darian, I'm not asking for an answer. I'm not asking for anything except the chance to keep trying, to keep being present, to keep showing up. He paused. That petition the council denied? I read it, every word. It was brilliant. They're cowards for rejecting it. They're politicians. It goes with the territory. Still, you deserve better. He hesitated. The foundation is doing important work. I see that now. I want to increase its funding. Double it if you think you can scale up effectively. Elara stopped walking. Double? The estate can afford it. And if it means helping more women, saving more families, yes, double. Why? Really why? Because I'm watching you change the world, and I want to be part of that. Not in charge of it. You're doing that fine on your own, but supporting it. Contributing to something that matters. His voice went quiet. You've built something meaningful, Elara. Something I could never have built. Let me help make it bigger. She searched his face for manipulation, for hidden agendas, found only sincerity. All right, she said, but I'm holding you to it, and if you try to interfere with how we run things, you'll fight me. I know. I'm counting on it. Spring came fully this time, warm and certain. The foundation expanded into a second office. They hired 3 more staff members, established a proper shelter for women in crisis, and launched a job training program that actually worked. The success brought attention, good and bad. The good: more donations, more support, more women finding their way to safety. The foundation was helping 20 to 30 women a month now, with success rates that surprised even Anne. The bad: backlash. Letters to the editor condemning the foundation for destroying families, sermons about the proper role of wives. Threats, vague at first, then specific enough that Anne hired security. Elara tried not to let it bother her, tried to focus on the work, the wins, the lives being saved. Then someone threw a brick through the Foundation's office window, in broad daylight, with a note attached, "Stop encouraging whores and homewreckers." No one was hurt. They'd all been in the back room at the time. But the message was clear. Someone wanted them scared, wanted them to stop. The city constable took a report, but didn't seem particularly motivated to investigate. "These things happen," he said with a shrug. "Controversial organization, controversial reactions." "Someone threw a brick at our building," Anne said flatly. "That's not a reaction. That's a crime." "I'll look into it." He clearly wouldn't. After he left, Elara looked at the broken window, the scattered glass, the hateful note. She thought about all the women who'd walked through that door looking for help, all the children who'd been saved from dangerous homes. And she got angry. Really, properly angry. "We're not stopping," she said. "I didn't think we would," Anne replied. "But we should be careful. Maybe hire real security instead of just talking about it." "Agreed. And we go public. I want to give a statement about this. Make it impossible to ignore." "That'll make you a target." "I'm already a target. Might as well make it mean something." She gave the statement the next day, standing in front of the broken window with reporters gathered around. She wore her nicest dress, one of the few from her Duchess days that still fit, and spoke with absolute clarity. "Someone threw a brick through our window because they don't like the work we do. Because helping women leave dangerous situations threatens them. That tells you everything you need to know about their position. They can't win the argument, so they resort to violence." She paused, making eye contact with each reporter. "We're not stopping. We're not slowing down. We're expanding. Because for every person who throws a brick, there are 10 women who need help, and we won't abandon them." The statement made every major newspaper. Suddenly, the Foundation wasn't just local news. It was a story. The disgraced Duchess who'd left her husband and built a movement. Support poured in. Donations tripled. Women's groups from other provinces wrote asking how to start similar organizations. Even some men, lords and merchants who'd never publicly supported women's causes, sent quiet letters of encouragement and funding. But the threats got worse too. Letters promising violence. Men showing up at the office demanding to know where their wives were. One particularly aggressive confrontation that required the constable to actually do his job for once. "Maybe we should slow down," Anne suggested after the third threatening letter in a week, "just until things settle." "Things won't settle," Elara said. "They'll keep pushing until we push back harder." She was right. A week later, someone tried to burn down the shelter. Failed. The night guard saw the smoke and put it out. But the intent was clear. This time, the constable couldn't ignore it. This time, there was an actual investigation. And this time, they caught the arsonist, a merchant whose wife had left him 3 months earlier with the Foundation's help. The trial was quick and public. The man was sentenced to 5 years, and the judge made a point of condemning not just the arson, but the attitude behind it. "This court will not tolerate violence against organizations providing legal assistance," he declared. "Whatever your personal opinions on marriage and custody, the law is clear. Arson is a crime. Attempted murder is a crime. And any man who thinks otherwise will face the full weight of justice." It was a victory, a real one, the kind that changed the conversation. After the trial, Lord Vernon approached Elara outside the courthouse. That was satisfying to watch. "Your daughter is doing well, I hope. Thriving. She has a job now, teaching. Her children are happy. Because of you." He paused. "I'm hosting a dinner next month. Small gathering, influential people. I'd like you to attend, to speak about the Foundation's work. Your other guests won't appreciate that. Some won't, but some will. And those are the ones whose support matters." He smiled slightly. "Things are changing, Mrs. Whitcomb. Slowly, but changing. You're part of that." The dinner was exactly as awkward as Elara expected. Held at Vernon's estate, attended by lords and ladies who'd once been her peers. Many looked uncomfortable when she entered. Some left early rather than sit through her presentation. But others stayed, listened, asked questions that seemed genuinely curious rather than hostile. Lady Castellan, whose ball had been the scene of Elara's dramatic exit, approached her afterward. That was illuminating. I had no idea the custody laws were so unfair. Most people don't, until they're affected by them. My niece is in a difficult marriage. I've been telling her to endure, to think of the children. Lady Castellan looked troubled. But perhaps I've been giving her the wrong advice. Perhaps, Elara said carefully, you should tell her she has options, and that choosing her own well-being doesn't make her a bad mother. Sometimes it makes her a better one. Lady Castellan nodded slowly. I'll tell her about your foundation, if she needs help. It was a small thing, but it mattered. On the ride home, Darian, who'd attended the dinner but stayed quietly in the background, said, You were magnificent. I just told the truth. You made them listen. That's harder than just telling truth. He paused. They're starting to see you the way I'm learning to see you. Not as the Duchess who had a breakdown, as someone who saw a problem and fixed it. I didn't fix it. The system is still broken. But you're breaking it differently, from the inside out. That matters. Summer arrived with a heat wave that made the Foundation office unbearable. They worked anyway, sweating through case files and client meetings. The expansion was going well. They'd opened a third office in the northern province, established partnerships with 5 other women's organizations, and successfully handled 43 custody cases in 6 months. The work was exhausting. It was also addictive. Every woman who walked out with her children, every case won, every life changed. It fueled Elara in ways the Duchess role never had. But it was taking a toll. She was working 12-hour days, sleeping less, eating poorly. Rosalind noticed. Mama, you look tired. I'm fine, sweetheart. You say that a lot, but you have dark circles, and you forgot my birthday last week. Elara's heart stopped. I what? Well, you remembered the day after, and we celebrated then, but you forgot the actual day. Rosalind's voice was matter-of-fact, but her eyes were hurt. I know the work is important, but am I important too? The question gutted her. Of course you are. You're the most important thing in my life. Then maybe act like it sometimes? It was an 8-year-old's bluntness, but it hit like a hammer. Elara had been so focused on saving other families that she'd started neglecting her own. Had started making the same mistakes Darian used to make, prioritizing work over presence. She called Anne that evening. I need to scale back my hours. What? Why? Because I almost became the thing I left. So focused on the work that I forgot why I was doing it. Elara's voice was firm. I'll still run the foundation, but I need boundaries. I need time with Rosalind, time for myself. Otherwise, I'm just trading one kind of disappearing for another. Anne was quiet for a moment. You're right. I've been pushing too hard too. We need to hire more staff, distribute the workload better. Can we afford that? With the increased funding? Yes. We've been acting like a crisis organization when we should be building sustainable operations. Anne laughed ruefully. We need to take our own advice. You can't pour from an empty cup and all that. They restructured, hired 4 new case managers, established clear working hours, created protocols so the foundation could function even when Elara or Anne weren't physically present. It felt like failure at first, stepping back, doing less. But then Elara noticed she was sleeping better, eating real meals, actually present when she was with Rosalind instead of mentally reviewing case files. And the foundation didn't collapse. It thrived. Turned out that overwork had been making them less effective, not more. Elara started having regular dinners with Darian and Rosalind. Not always, not even usually, but often enough that it became a pattern, a routine, something they all looked forward to. You seem happier, Darian observed one evening after Rosalind had gone to bed. They were in the cottage. He'd started visiting sometimes, just to talk. It had become comfortable somehow, these conversations in her small kitchen over tea that Elara had finally learned to make properly. I am happier, she admitted. I was burning out. Didn't want to admit it, but I was. The foundation is still thriving, though. I see the reports. Because I stopped trying to do everything myself. Learned to delegate, to trust other people. She smiled slightly. Learned from your mistakes, actually. Watching what happened when you tried to control everything instead of building a real team. I'm glad my failures were educational for someone. Your failures were educational for both of us. Elara refilled his tea. You've changed, Darian, really changed. I see it in how you are with Roslyn, in how you run the estate now. I had a good teacher. Watching you rebuild from nothing, build something meaningful, it showed me what I'd been missing. He hesitated. I've been thinking about something, and I want your honest opinion. All right? What if I stepped back from some estate duties, appointed a full-time steward to handle day-to-day operations, freed up time to actually be present for Roslyn and, he met her eyes, for whatever else matters? You'd hate that. You've always been all about control. I would have hated it a year ago. Now, I think I'd like it. I'm tired of being busy all the time, tired of meetings and contracts and politics. I want to know my daughter, really know her, and I want... He trailed off. Want what? I want to deserve you, he said quietly. I know that ship has probably sailed. I know I destroyed too much. But if there's any chance, any possibility that we could try again, not as Duke and Duchess, but as actual partners, I want to be someone worthy of that chance. Elara sat very still. A year ago, she would have said no immediately. 6 months ago, she would have been skeptical. Now? I don't know if we can go back, she said honestly. Too much has happened, too much hurt. I'm not asking to go back, I'm asking to go forward. Differently, better. As what? I don't know, partners in raising Roslyn, friends, maybe someday more if you ever want that, but on your terms, at your pace, with your boundaries. He leaned forward. I'm not asking for an answer now, I'm just asking you to think about it. To not automatically say no to the possibility. Elara looked at him, this man who'd failed her so completely and was learning to be better. Who showed up? Who tried? Who'd given her the resources to build something meaningful and then stayed out of her way while she built it? I'll think about it, she said. But no promises. No promises, he agreed. Just possibility. Autumn brought news that changed everything. The Provincial Council had voted to revisit the custody petition, not because they'd had a change of heart, because 3 council members had been forced to resign over a corruption scandal, and the replacements were younger, more reform-minded. This is our chance, Anne said, spreading the documents across Elara's desk. A real hearing, not just a petition review. We can present evidence, call witnesses, make a case. What do we need? Everything. Statistics on our success rates, testimony from women we've helped, expert opinions from physicians and counselors about the impact of domestic violence on children, legal precedents from other provinces. Anne looked up. And you, they need to hear from you, the Duchess who walked away and built all this. The hearing was scheduled for November. They had 6 weeks to prepare. Elara threw herself into it, gathering data, coordinating witnesses, refining arguments. The Foundation's expansion had given them a wealth of evidence. They had hard numbers now, documented outcomes, proof that mothers who left abusive situations and received support produced healthier, better-adjusted children than those who stayed. The case built itself, piece by piece. They were ready. The hearing was held in the provincial capital, in a grand chamber designed to intimidate. The council sat at an elevated bench, 7 members, 4 men and 3 women. The gallery was packed with observers, reporters, people who'd come to see the disgraced Duchess argue for changing the world. Elara wore simple clothes, a well-made dress, but nothing ostentatious. She'd learned that looking too wealthy undermined the message. She was there as someone who'd lived it, not as aristocracy playing at activism. Anne presented the legal framework, the statistics, the precedents. She was methodical, thorough, building an airtight case for why custody law needed reform. Then it was Elara's turn. She stood before the council, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes. This was it, the moment that mattered. Members of the council, she began. A year and a half ago, I left my husband. I was a duchess. I had wealth, status, security, and I gave it all up because I was invisible, because I was drowning, because staying meant teaching my daughter that a woman's voice doesn't matter. She paused, letting that sink in. I was one of the lucky ones. I had a dowry property to escape to. I had education, skills, connections. Most women don't. Most women stay because they have no choice, no resources, no options. And the law says their suffering doesn't matter as much as their husband's rights. She pulled out a folder. This is Clara Thompson. She left a violent husband with 2 sons. The court nearly sent them back because she lived above a tavern. Because poverty, in the court's eyes, was worse than abuse. We fought for her. She won. Those boys are safe now. Another folder. Elizabeth Morris. 3 children. Husband who drank and beat her. We helped her leave. She has custody now. She has a job. Her children are thriving. More folders, more names, more stories. We've helped 93 women in 18 months. 78 of them retained custody of their children, not because we changed the law, because we documented everything, because we built evidence so overwhelming that judges had to acknowledge it. She set down the folders. But we shouldn't have to fight this hard. We shouldn't have to prove that a mother's presence matters, that abuse is worse than poverty, that children deserve protection from violence, even when that violence comes from their fathers. One of the council members, a woman in her 50s, spoke up. Mrs. Whitcomb, you're asking us to fundamentally change how we view parental rights. No, I'm asking you to actually apply them fairly, to look at evidence instead of assumptions, to prioritize children's welfare over father's pride. Some would say you're encouraging women to leave their marriages over minor disputes. Some would be wrong. Elara's voice was hard. We don't help women leave over minor disputes. We help women escape abuse. There's a difference, and if you can't see it, you're part of the problem. The gallery murmured. Anne looked slightly panicked. Insulting the council was risky, but Elara was done being polite. I walked away from everything because staying was killing me, and I'm standing here today because I was lucky enough to survive it. But I've met dozens of women who weren't lucky, who stayed because they had no choice, who raised children in homes filled with violence because the law said that was better than being poor. Her voice rose. If this council can't see that as a problem worth solving, then you don't deserve to be making these decisions. Silence. Absolute silence. Then one of the new council members, a man maybe 40, with sharp eyes, spoke. Mrs. Whitcomb raises valid points. The question isn't whether abuse exists, it's whether our current laws adequately address it. And based on the evidence presented today, they clearly don't. Another member nodded. I agree. We should draft reform legislation. We should put it to a full council vote, a third added. The debate went on for 2 hours. Elara answered questions, clarified points, refused to back down. Anne provided legal context. The witnesses they'd brought, women who'd escaped abuse, children who'd survived, told their stories. When it was over, the council voted, 4 in favor of reform, 3 against. It passed. The gallery erupted. Elara stood frozen, barely processing it. They'd won. Actually won. Anne grabbed her in a fierce hug. We did it! You did it! We all did it. Outside the chamber, reporters swarmed. Questions came from every direction. Elara answered them on autopilot, still somewhat in shock. Mrs. Whitcomb, how does it feel to change the law? Overwhelming, but necessary. Will you continue running the foundation? Absolutely. This is just the beginning. And your husband? Rumor is you're reconciling? That stopped her. My husband and I are learning to be partners. What that means long term, I don't know. But we're figuring it out. That evening, there was a celebration at the foundation office. Staff, volunteers, women they'd helped, supporters, everyone crowded into their small space, toasting with cheap wine and homemade food. Elara stood in the corner watching it all, feeling surreal. Clara Thompson approached, her sons trailing behind. Thank you, Clara said, for fighting, for not giving up. Thank you for being brave enough to leave. I wasn't brave, I was desperate, but you made desperate feel like enough. The celebration went late. When it finally wound down, Elara walked out to find Darian waiting by his carriage. I heard, he said. The vote, the law change. News travels fast. It's all anyone's talking about, the Duchess, who reformed custody law. He smiled. You were magnificent, apparently. Insulted the council, and they still voted yes. I told the truth. They finally listened. Rosalind wanted to be here, but I thought maybe you needed tonight for yourself, for the work, He hesitated. Though if you want company, I'd like to take you to dinner. Celebrate properly. Elara almost said no. Then she thought about it. This man who'd failed her, learned from it, and was still trying. Who showed up, who supported her work without trying to control it, who was learning to be the partner she'd needed all along. Yes, she said. Let's have dinner. They went to the same small restaurant where they'd had that first family dinner with Rosalind, sat at the same table, ordered different food. I'm proud of you, Darian said. I know I don't have the right to be, but I am. What you built, what you accomplished, it's extraordinary. It's not finished. One province changing law isn't enough. We need national reform. I know, and you'll fight for that too, because you don't know how to stop fighting. He reached across the table, stopping just short of taking her hand. Can I ask you something? You're going to anyway. Fair point. He took a breath. Is there any chance for us? Real us? Not just co-parents? Elara looked at him. Really looked. Saw the man who'd ignored her for 7 years, but also the man who'd learned to listen, who'd read her journals and actually understood, who'd given her the resources to change the world and then stepped back. I don't know, she said honestly. The hurt is still there. I'm still angry about what you did, what you didn't do. I understand. But I also see who you're becoming, and I like that person, respect them, maybe even… She trailed off. Maybe even what? Maybe even could love them someday, if they keep showing up. Darian's expression did something complicated. I'll keep showing up, every day, however you need me to. Even if I never want to remarry, never want to go back to being the Duchess in the grand house? Especially then, because I'm starting to understand that the Duchess was a role you played. This, he gestured at her, at the real her. This is who you actually are, and she's far more interesting than any Duchess. They talked for hours, about the Foundation's next steps, about Rosalind's education, about the estate and the cottage, and what their strange blended life might look like going forward. It wasn't romance, not yet, maybe not ever, but it was honest. It was real. And it was a foundation they could maybe build on. A year later, on the anniversary of the day Elara had walked out of the Castellan ball, she stood in the same ballroom. Darian stood beside her in formal wear, looking uncomfortable but committed. You don't have to be here, she told him. I know you hate these events. So do you, but we're doing it anyway. He smiled. Partners, remember? They weren't remarried, weren't even officially together in the romantic sense, but they'd found a rhythm. Shared custody of Rosalind, regular family dinners, occasional dates that felt more like friendship than courtship. It worked. For now, it was enough. She didn't destroy her life. She rebuilt it, better. And in the process, she changed the law, helped hundreds of women, and showed us all what courage actually looks like. Applause, loud and genuine. Elara looked around at faces she recognized, some friendly, some grudgingly respectful, all acknowledging what she'd accomplished. Mrs. Whitcomb, Lady Castellan said, would you say a few words? Elara made her way to the front, looked out at the assembled crowd. 2 years ago, we're here tonight to celebrate the Whitcomb Foundation and the remarkable woman who built it. Elara tried not to squirm under the attention. 2 years ago, in this very room, Duchess Elara Whitcomb walked out on her marriage in front of dozens of witnesses. Many of us thought she'd lost her mind, that she'd destroyed her life. Lady Castellan paused. We were wrong. She didn't destroy her life. She rebuilt it, better. And in the process, she changed the law, helped hundreds of women, and showed us all what courage actually looks like. Applause, loud and genuine. Elara looked around at faces she recognized, some friendly, some grudgingly respectful, all acknowledging what she'd accomplished. Mrs. Whitcomb, Lady Castellan said, would you say a few words? Elara made her way to the front, looked out at the assembled crowd. 2 years ago, she'd stood in a room like this and been invisible. Now they were all watching, all listening. Thank you for your support, she began. The Foundation's work is only possible because people believe in it, believe that women deserve choices, that children deserve safety, that the law should protect the vulnerable, not just the powerful. She paused, gathering her thoughts. When I left my marriage, I didn't know what would happen. I was terrified, broke, living in a cottage with a leaking roof and no plan beyond getting through each day. But I learned something important. Survival isn't the same as living, and sometimes you have to destroy one life to build a better one. More applause. She waited for it to quiet. The foundation has helped over 400 women, but there are thousands more who still need help. Women trapped in dangerous situations. Women who think they have no options. Women who are disappearing the way I disappeared. Her voice strengthened. We've changed the law in 6 provinces, but that's not enough. We need national reform. We need resources in every community. We need a world where leaving abuse is supported, not punished. Where mothers are valued as much as fathers. Where children's welfare actually matters. She looked directly at the crowd. So yes, celebrate what we've done. But then help us do more. Because this fight isn't over. It's just beginning. The applause was thunderous. Later, as the event wound down, Rosalind appeared. She'd been with friends in the adjoining room. She was 9 now, taller, more confident, split evenly between her 2 worlds. Mama, that was a good speech. Thank you, sweetheart. Are you and Papa going to dance? Everyone's dancing. Elara looked at Darian, who looked back at her with a question in his eyes. We could, she said. If you want to. I'd like that. They moved to the dance floor, the same floor where she'd walked out 2 years ago, where she'd ended one life and started another. Darian held her carefully, respectfully, like something precious but fragile. Thank you. For what? For not giving up on me. For giving me the chance to be better. You did the work. I just stopped accepting less than I deserved. Still, thank you. They danced, and Elara realized something profound. She wasn't the same woman who'd left this ballroom 2 years ago. That woman had been disappearing, fading, desperate. This woman was solid, present, sure of herself and her place in the world. She'd built a life that mattered, not because of a title or a marriage or anyone else's validation, but because she'd chosen to matter, to be visible, to fight. What are you thinking? Darian asked. That I'm happy, really happy, not despite everything that happened, but because of it. Even the hard parts? Especially the hard parts. They taught me what I was made of. The song ended, they stepped apart, and Elara saw Rosalind watching them with a complicated expression. Hope and uncertainty mixed together. Can I ask you something? Rosalind said when they joined her. Are you two getting back together for real? Living together again? Elara and Darian exchanged glances. Maybe, Elara said. Someday, when we're both ready. When it feels right instead of rushed. But you love each other? We're learning to, Darian said. Learning to be partners instead of strangers living in the same house. Rosalind seemed to accept this. Okay, but when you do move back together, I want my own room at both places, so I can pick where I want to be. Deal, Elara said, smiling. As they left the ball, together but in separate carriages, heading to separate homes, Elara looked back at the building one last time. 2 years ago, she'd walked out with nothing but a ring left on a table and a desperate hope that anything was better than invisibility. She'd been right. Not because the road was easy, it wasn't. Not because everything worked out perfectly. It didn't. But because she'd learned the most important lesson of her life. You can't disappear if you refuse to fade. She'd refused. She'd fought. She'd built something meaningful from nothing, and in the process, she'd become exactly who she was always meant to be. Not a duchess defined by a title, not a wife defined by a husband, but Elara. Whole, complete, undeniably present. The woman who'd changed the law, who'd saved hundreds of women, who'd rebuilt her marriage into something honest, who'd raised a daughter who knew her own worth, the woman who'd stopped being invisible and became unforgettable instead. 6 months later, Elara stood in her cottage garden, expanded now, productive, beautiful in its practical way, and read the letter that had just arrived. The National Council was considering the custody reform petition. Based on the success in 6 provinces, based on the Foundation's documented outcomes, based on a groundswell of support that couldn't be ignored anymore. They wanted her to testify, to make the case for changing the law across the entire realm. "Mama," Rosalind called from inside. "Papa's here. He brought dinner." Elara looked up to see Darian approaching, carrying a basket, Rosalind dancing around him. They'd been doing this more often lately, shared dinners, shared evenings, slowly rebuilding what had broken. Last week he'd asked if she'd ever consider moving back to Ashmont House, not as the invisible Duchess, as an equal partner, with her own study for Foundation work, with autonomy and respect, and all the things she'd never had before. She'd said maybe, asked for time to think. She was still thinking. "Good news?" Darian asked, seeing her expression. "The best. National reform might actually happen." "Of course it will. You're fighting for it." Rosalind grabbed the letter. "Does this mean you'll be even busier?" "For a while, yes. But you'll still have time for me?" Elara pulled her daughter close. "Always. I promised I wouldn't disappear again. I meant it." They went inside together, the three of them, this strange rebuilt family, had dinner around the small table, laughed at Rosalind's stories from school, made plans for the weekend. It wasn't the life Elara had imagined when she'd married at 19. It was better. Messier, harder, more honest, real in a way that grand ballrooms and Duchess titles had never been. Later, after Rosalind went to bed and Darian prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "I love you," he said quietly. "I know I don't have the right to say that yet. I know I need to keep earning it, but I wanted you to know." Elara looked at him, this man who'd failed her, learned from it, and was becoming someone she could actually love back. "I know," she said, "and someday soon I might be ready to say it back. I'll wait." "I know you will. That's why there's a chance." After he left, Elara stood in her cottage, her small, imperfect, absolutely perfect cottage, and felt something settle into place. She'd walked out of a ballroom with nothing but desperate hope and a ring left behind. She'd survived poverty and isolation and custody battles. She'd built a foundation that changed lives. She'd rewritten laws. She'd learned to be present instead of invisible. And along the way, she'd discovered the most important truth. The power had always been hers. She'd just needed the courage to claim it. She'd claimed it. She'd used it. She'd changed the world. And she wasn't done yet. Not even close.